Chapter 1599. Li Yuan? The 10th Elder? Qin Feiyong was stunned. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "What are you doing here?" As he spoke, his eyes flashed coldly. Li Yuan quickly waved his hand and said, "Brother, don't misunderstand. I don't mean any harm. I'm here to cooperate with you." Cooperation? Qin Feiyong was surprised. One had to know. Not long ago, he killed the Grand Elder of the Palace of Fengtian and extorted a huge sum of money from the Palace of Fengtian. Now, they were here to talk about cooperation? Li Yuan said, "Don't worry. We won't play dirty tricks behind your back like the Vanga League. I'm just wondering. I killed your people and stole your artifacts. Don't you hate me?" Qin Feiyong said. Li Yuan smiled and said, "There are no eternal enemies in this world. There are only eternal benefits. Brother, am I right?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. He nodded and smiled. "That's true. All right, I agree to cooperate with you." Li Yuan was overjoyed. Originally, he thought that Qin Feiyong would decline or make some conditions, but he didn't expect him to agree so readily. So much so that he couldn't use any of the words he had thought of to persuade Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong said, "Tell me, how do we cooperate and what do I get in return?" "Let's work together to destroy the Vanga League. After destroying the Vanga League, the Palace of Fengtian will help you destroy the Tianyang Empire." Li Yuan smiled. Qin Feiyong said, "You guys have a good plan. After destroying the Vanga League, the Palace of Fengtian can unify the Black Tortoise world and become the only Overlord." "Yes." Li Yuan nodded. He didn't hide anything. Qin Feiyong nodded and smiled. "I like people like you. Unlike those hypocrites in the Vanga League. Just looking at them makes me sick." Li Yuan smiled awkwardly. Although he was praised by Qin Feiyong, he couldn't bring himself to be happy. This was because there was more or less a derogatory element in it. Qin Feiyong asked, "Can you represent Fengtian Palace and its palace master?" Li Yuan was taken aback and asked suspiciously, "Why do you ask?" Qin Feiyong said, "Since it's a cooperation, it must be mutually beneficial." Li Yuan said, "Didn't I say earlier that my Fengtian Palace will help you destroy the Heavenly Sun Empire?" "Not enough." Qin Feiyong shook his head. "Then what else do you want?" Li Yuan asked. He was rather perturbed. "Don't ask for too much again." Qin Feiyong said, "If you can make the decision, I'll talk with you. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time." Li Yuan hesitated. If it were anyone else, he would have dared to make the decision. But now he was facing Qin Feiyong. Who knew what kind of outrageous demands he would make? With this thought in mind, Li Yuan smiled and said, "Since that's the case, then you should talk to the palace master face to face." "Then lead the way," Qin Feiyong said. "Brother, you're such a straightforward person. Please." Li Yuan opened a teleportation door and retreated to the side. Qin Feiyong took a step forward and walked in. After Qin Feiyong entered, Li Yuan hurriedly followed. The next moment, Qin Feiyong landed in the air above a mountain peak. This was the place where Li Yuan and the palace master of Fengtian Palace had discussed an hour ago. Standing in the sky, Qin Feiyong scanned the mountains and rivers below. Giant peaks towered into the sky, exuding a majestic aura. Mountain stream. The grass and trees were vigorous, and the fierce beasts were galloping. A black river ran across the entire mountain, connecting to the Black Ocean on the other side. At the top of each giant peak, there was a great hall of an ancient castle. It was like an ancient beast lying on the top of the mountain, releasing an aura that made one's heart palpitate. And in those great halls, Qin Feiyong could clearly sense a terrifying aura. These auras were almost all false gods. This was a very terrifying place. However, what surprised Qin Feiyong the most was the Black River and the Black Ocean. Why was it so strange? At the same time, the palace master of Fengtian Palace was still standing on the top of the mountain. However, the elders had already left. But the one-armed old man was still there. At this moment, he was like a dead dog, lying on the ground in a sorry state, his body dripping with blood. As soon as Qin Feiyong appeared, the two of them sensed him and immediately looked at Qin Feiyong. "It settled so quickly?" The palace master of Fengtian Palace was stunned. Then a smile crept onto his face. How is that possible? The one-armed old man had a look of disbelief. Wasn't this person dead? Seeing Qin Feiyong looking at the sea in the distance, Li Yuan whispered. Brother, the palace master is waiting for you below, and there's another surprise. Surprise? Qin Feiyong was stunned. He looked down at the top of the mountain. When he saw the one-armed old man, his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Whoosh! He landed on the top of the mountain and kicked the one-armed old man's penis without saying a word. Ah! The one-armed old man immediately let out a miserable howl. He covered his crotch and kept rolling on the ground. Li Yuan landed next to the palace master and snickered. It hurts just looking at him. The palace master shook his head and smiled. He has agreed to cooperate? Yes. But he seems to have a request and wants to talk to you face to face. Li Yuan said. As expected. The palace master smiled faintly. My lord, what's going on? Didn't you say that you only wanted to humiliate him? Why did you cripple him? Li Yuan looked at the one-armed old man and asked suspiciously. I only wanted to humiliate him and let him go. But after thinking about it, since I have to deal with the Vanga League sooner or later, I might as well take this opportunity to take him down. In this way, I will have one less powerful opponent when I face the Vanga League head-on in the future. At the same time, take it as a greeting gift for Qin Feiyong. The palace master smiled. This is a good greeting gift. Li Yuan smiled secretly. The one-armed old man almost killed Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong must hate him to the core. And this point. It could be seen from Qin Feiyong's current behavior. Therefore, this undoubtedly deepened their cooperation. Why aren't you dead? The one-armed old man was in excruciating pain and roared angrily. Do you want me to die so badly? It's a pity. I just can't die. I wonder if you've heard of this saying? Cleverness overreaches itself. If you didn't plot against me in the Qingyang Mountains, we might have formed an alliance and eliminated Fengtian Palace together. But you pushed me to Fengtian Palace. Facing the anger of me and Fengtian Palace, I'm really curious. Can your Vanga League survive? Qin Feiyong sneered. What? You formed an alliance with Fengtian Palace. The one-armed old man's eyes trembled. Qin Feiyong and Fengtian Palace teamed up. This was a disaster for the Vanga League. Yes, we've formed an alliance. I have to thank you for your help. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found this opportunity. The palace master of Fengtian Palace smiled. The one-armed old man forgot his pain. His heart was shrouded by a shadow of despair. The palace master of Fengtian Palace smiled coldly and looked at Qin Feiyong. Little brother, do you want to kill him? No hurry. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and stepped on the one-armed old man. He looked at the palace master and said, I have 2 requests. Speak. The palace master of Fengtian Palace said. Qin Feiyong said, First, the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire's treasure trove and herb fields will all belong to me. No problem. The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded without hesitation. Although the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire's wealth was huge and tempting, it was nothing compared to unifying the Black Tortoise world. When Fengtian Palace unifies the Black Tortoise world, all the resources in the Black Tortoise world would belong to Fengtian Palace. As long as Qin Feiyong was satisfied, it didn't matter what he wanted. Second, when I leave the Black Tortoise world, I don't care what Fengtian Palace is planning, but you must give Willow Tree and the 6 elders a place to live. And promise that you will never harm them. Of course, before I leave, I will remind them not to offend Fengtian Palace. Qin Feiyong said. As long as they don't stir up trouble, I can promise that I will not harm them. The palace master of Fengtian Palace pondered for a while and smiled at Qin Feiyong. All right, let our alliance begin. Qin Feiyong said. Then I wish us a happy cooperation. The palace master of Fengtian Palace smiled and extended his hand. Happy cooperation. Qin Feiyong also extended his hand and shook hands with the palace master of Fengtian Palace. It's over, the one-armed old man murmured. Qin Feiyong's foundation was already terrifying enough. He had 8 false gods under his command and a divine artifact. Coupled with the palace master of Fengtian Palace, would the Vanga League be able to stop them? Just thinking about it made his scalp tingle. He hurriedly said, Qin Feiyong, let's work together. The palace master of Fengtian Palace and Li Yuan raised their eyebrows. Qin Feiyong pursed his lips and said lightly, "There's no medicine for regret in this world. I know, I've gone overboard. But now I know I was wrong. And I can promise you that the benefits you get from working with the Vanga League will be much greater than working with the palace master of Fengtian Palace." The one-armed old man said. "Is that so?" Qin Feiyong looked at him mockingly. Yes, yes, yes. I can also promise you that after we get rid of the palace master of Fengtian, Willow Tree will be on the same level as the Vanga League. In fact, I can even give you 2 more divine artifacts after this is done. The one-armed old man said. The palace master of Fengtian Palace and Li Yuan became nervous when they heard this. Qin Feiyong was stunned and said, "So the Vanga League has a lot of divine artifacts?" "Yes." The one-armed old man nodded. "Not bad, not bad." Qin Feiyong laughed and turned to look at the palace master of Fengtian Palace. He said, "The Vanga League's divine artifacts." He stopped halfway through his sentence. The palace master of Fengtian Palace was puzzled at first. He did not know what Qin Feiyong was trying to say. But with Li Yuan's reminder, he suddenly understood. He looked at Qin Feiyong and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I promise the palace master of Fengtian Palace that I won't fight with you for it." At the same time, he was secretly relieved. It seemed that Qin Feiyong would not change his mind now. "Okay." Qin Feiyong nodded and looked down at the one-armed old man. He said, "What do you think after hearing our plan?" "You said it deliberately for me to hear?" The one-armed old man was stunned. "That's right. I want you to taste the despair of knowing our plan but being unable to stop it." Chapter 1600. You! The one-armed old man was enraged. After living for so many years, when had he ever been toyed with like this? "I can swear that you will regret this. The people of Fengtian Palace are not as simple as you think. The sincerity they're showing now is all a lie." He roared. "You still want to sow discord? What a joke. The people of Fengtian Palace aren't that great, but they are many times better than the Vanga League." Li Yuan sneered. "I know how to flatter myself too." The one-armed old man sneered. "All right, don't waste your time. Even if what you said is true, I won't choose to work with the Vanga League. You should think about how to face the wrath of Willow Tree and Yu Huang." Qin Feiyong waved his hand and sent the one-armed old man to the castle. Li Yuan asked curiously, "Brother, are Yu Huang and Willow Tree still alive?" "No." Qin Feiyong nodded. Li Yuan and the palace master of Fengtian Palace looked at each other. They were really lucky to be alive. Li Yuan smiled. "That's great. With the 2 of them, it will be easier for us to destroy the Vanga League." Qin Feiyong glanced at him and asked, "Are you serious?" Li Yuan's body stiffened and he quickly nodded. "Of course." The corners of Qin Feiyong's mouth curled up into a meaningful smile. The palace master of Fengtian Palace quickly changed the topic and asked, "Little brother, when do we make our move?" "When Willow Tree and Yu Huang recover from their injuries." Qin Feiyong smiled and looked at the Black Sea. "Is that the Nether Sea, one of the 4 forbidden lands in the Black Tortoise world?" "Yes." The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded. Qin Feiyong asked curiously, "What's in the Nether Sea?" "Everything. But it's also very dangerous. That's because the water of the Netherworld Sea can corrode one's soul. Only false gods can enter." The palace master of the Imperial Conferring Palace said. "How big is the Netherworld Sea?" Qin Feiyong asked again. "It's huge. Even I would need 3 days to reach the end of the Netherworld Sea. Furthermore, there are a lot of islands in the Nether Sea, and there are quite a few demigod realm beasts residing on those islands. Once they are disturbed, the consequences will be unimaginable." The palace master of the Imperial Conferring Palace said. "A demigod beast?" Qin Feiyong murmured. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he turned to look at the 2 palace masters of the Celestial Worship Palace and said, "I heard from Willow Tree that you and the Vanga League have set a rule. People from the Black Tortoise world are not allowed to kill demigod dire beasts. Why is that?" "It has something to do with the one above." The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace pointed at the sky. His words extremely obscure. "Guardian?" Qin Feiyong frowned. The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace's expression changed, and he hurriedly whispered, "Little brother, the name of the guardian can only be understood, not spoken. Otherwise it will bring disaster. Qin Feiyong was stunned, and a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. Both of them saw it and couldn't help but mutter in their hearts. This was a typical example of a newborn calf not being afraid of a tiger. But they didn't know. They regarded the guardian of the Grim Reaper, and they were almost killed by Qin Feiyong. The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace said, "Little brother, I have a question to ask." "Go ahead," Qin Feiyong said. "When you entered the Black Tortoise world, did you see a fire dragon?" The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace asked. "Yes." Qin Feiyong nodded and asked, "What's wrong?" "Then how did you come in at that time?" The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace and Li Yuan were both curious. Qin Feiyong said, "If I say that I killed it, would you believe me?" This joke isn't funny at all. Li Yuan was speechless. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled. He knew that no one would believe him. He said indifferently, "I took advantage of the time when it was sleeping to sneak in." The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace said, "Then, when you leave the Black Tortoise world, you must be careful, don't make any noise and wake it up." "I know." Qin Feiyong nodded. "All right then. I'll go and make preparations to destroy the Vanga League." Li Yuan, arrange a place for this little brother to rest for a few days. The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace said. Qin Feiyong said, "No need, I'll just rest in the castle." "All right. I'll have Li Yuan stay here if you need anything, just tell him." The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace smiled. Qin Feiyong nodded. The palace master of Celestial Submission Palace said a few more words to Li Yuan, then turned around and left. After watching the palace master leave, Li Yuan retracted his gaze and smiled. "Brother, our palace master is a good person. I like his straightforwardness. However, I believe that you should know that I hate people who only listen to me behind my back." Qin Feiyong said. I understand. Li Yuan nodded repeatedly. Qin Feiyong glanced at him and went straight into the castle. What a scary young man. After Qin Feiyong left, Li Yuan was sweating profusely. Although he could defeat Qin Feiyong in a second in terms of cultivation, Qin Feiyong's every gaze seemed to carry an invisible deterrent force. Especially that extraordinary insight and sensitivity. It made people uncontrollably flustered. Being enemies with such a person really made one unable to eat or sleep well. Inside the castle, the one-armed old man was curled up in a corner. No one paid attention to him, but when he saw Qin Feiyong appear, his eyes were filled with hatred. Qin Feiyong ignored him and looked at Fatso, asking, "Did you take his Qianquan bag?" "I've searched it, no. It should have been taken by the palace master of Celestial Submission Palace," Fatso said. Qin Feiyong nodded and glanced at Mu Xingxing, who was also curled up in a corner, then looked at Dan Wangkai and said, "We've seized a lot of Qianquan bags in the past 2 days, right?" The Qianquan bags of Mu Xingxing, Pei Yunchang, the head of the pagoda, Shilan, the 5 elders of Celestial Submission Palace, Ning Yifeng, Zhao Shiming, and the others are all with me. Dan Wangkai nodded. These people are either false gods or disciples of rich families, so they must have a lot of herbs. Sort them out as soon as possible. But you don't have to report to me, you can do it yourself. But if you find the godly spell, remember to give it to me," Qin Feiyong said. "Okay," Dan Wangkai said. Qin Feiyong withdrew his gaze, took out the long stick he took from the one-armed old man, and lowered his head to ponder. Judging from the aura, this godly artifact was a level higher than the Rainbow Sword and the 7-Star Sword. Who should he give it to? Fatso and Lu Hong both had godly artifacts. Willow Tree and Yu Huang also had godly artifacts. As for himself, he had Chang Shui, the ancient castle, and the Fire Lotus, so he didn't need it. Qin Feiyong suddenly looked at Wolf King. It seemed that this guy didn't have a godly artifact yet. He couldn't help but feel ashamed. Along the way, the white-eyed wolf had helped him many times. Especially the people in the spiritual state, the white-eyed wolf had saved him many times. How could he forget about this guy now? Qin Feiyong shook his head, threw the long stick to the white-eyed wolf, and said with a smile, "Although you can't revive now, you can keep it for self-defense." "You finally remembered me? I thought you would always ignore me." The white-eyed wolf glared at Qin Feiyong with dissatisfaction, grabbed the long stick happily, and rubbed it lovingly. "Boss Wolf, You've made a fortune. This long stick is called the sky-breaking stick, and it's a level higher than the 7-star sword in my hand. Willow Tree opened his eyes and looked at the white-eyed wolf. Really? The white-eyed wolf was surprised. Of course. As the Grand Deacon of the Vanga League, how can the godly artifact be too weak? I think it's on the same level as the fire lotus in the young master's hand. Willow Tree nodded. Not bad, not bad. Have a taste of my dog-beating stick. The white-eyed wolf nodded, jumped up, and rushed to Mu Shinkong, and gave him a good beating. Bastard! Why did you hit me for no reason? Mu Shinkong screamed and roared. I don't like you, okay? The white-eyed wolf smirked and hit Mu Shinkong's head with the stick. Blood immediately spurted out. Mu Shinkong fainted on the spot and fell to the ground. Poor kid. Willow Tree shook his head, and his eyes were full of sympathy. Facing the white-eyed wolf, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. Qin Feiyang also shook his head and smiled. He walked to the altar, opened the 6 words divine formula, and continued to copy the 6th stroke of the Xing formula. The 6th stroke was also the last stroke. He was looking forward to seeing how powerful the Xing formula was. Time flew by. Half a month had passed in the castle. Only a day and a half had passed in the outside world. Willow Tree and Yo Huang's injuries had healed. The 6 great elders had also adjusted to their best state after half a month of cultivation. Dan Wangkai also sorted out all the Chengkuan bags, as well as the medicinal materials looted from Peach Blossom City last time. There were all kinds of medicinal materials, medicinal pills, gold coins, and countless. There were at least hundreds of perfect battle arts and perfect auxiliary battle arts. But he didn't find any divine arts and artifacts. However, Dan Wangkai was already very satisfied. Because these medicinal materials and battle arts were comparable to a big treasure. And he also found a lot of Kuei water essence, E-wood essence, 6th earth essence, 4th fire essence, and 8th gold essence. In other words, now, whether it was the spirit congealing pill, great creation pill, or 5 elements universe pill, they could all be refined in large quantities. And after Willow Tree and Yu Huang recovered, the first one they took care of was the one-armed old man. His ending was naturally quite miserable. He was even tortured to kneel and beg for mercy. However, although Willow Tree and Yu Huang had recovered, Qin Feiyang didn't immediately stop copying the Xing formula. It wasn't until the next morning that he retracted his arm and closed the 6 words formula. Outside, the sun rose, the morning sun shone on the earth, and everything gradually woke up. Qin Feiyang turned to look at Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 great elders. Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 great elders also knew that a great battle was about to begin, and they all got up to look at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and 6 battle swords appeared and flew to the 6 great elders. The 6 great elders were excited. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "It's not for you, it's just for you to kill the enemy temporarily." When the 6 heard this, a trace of disappointment suddenly crept up on their faces. But they didn't say much. They were already satisfied that Qin Feiyang didn't kill them. One after another, they dripped blood to recognize the master and put away the battle swords. "Are you ready?" Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and asked. "Yes." Everyone nodded. "Then let's go." A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes, and he took a group of people and left the castle murderously. Chapter 1601. Outside. For the past 2 days, Li Yuan had been meditating. As soon as he sensed the aura of Qin Feiyang and the others, he immediately opened his eyes. When he saw that Willow Tree and Yu Huang had already recovered to their peak state, a look of disbelief flashed across his eyes. After suffering such serious injuries, they actually recovered in just 2 days? Are you kidding me? Could it be that they have divine pills? Qin Feiyang saw Li Yuan's doubts, but did not explain. He said, "Inform the palace master that we will set off immediately." Okay. Li Yuan hurriedly nodded and got up to look at Willow Tree and Yu Huang, as if he was looking at monsters. Whoosh! Immediately after, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared like lightning. "Everyone, listen up. Gather here quickly. Soon." A voice filled with murderous intent echoed from the top of a mountain. Qin Feiyang looked up and saw the palace master of Fengtian Palace standing in the sky, his aura shaking the void and earth. Whoosh! As soon as the palace master of Fengtian Palace finished speaking, figures rushed out of the halls on the giant peaks one after another. These people were men and women, old and young. But without exception, they all emitted the aura of a false god. There was not even a single war emperor. Qin Feiyong said in surprise, "Is this Fengtian Palace full of false gods?" "Not really. This is the holy land of Fengtian Palace, so only false gods are qualified to live here." "Of course, Li Chong is another matter," Willow Tree said. "What about the others?" Qin Feiyong asked. Willow Tree turned around and pointed to a mountain in front of them. "The disciples below the War Emperor level, including the family members of the false gods, are all over there." Qin Feiyong turned his head and looked over. The place where Willow Tree pointed was thousands of miles away. That place was also filled with strange peaks and precipitous ridges, with layers upon layers of mountains. But in comparison, the mountains there were much inferior to the Holy Land. They did not have the kind of majestic aura that could shock one's soul. However, one could faintly see that there was an ancient city located in the mountains. But the city wasn't big. It covered an area of several miles. This meant that the population was not large either. That city is called Sky Tribute City. No matter if it's the Vanga League or Fengtian Palace, they don't recruit unless they're extremely talented. Therefore, most of the people in Reverence City are descendants of the false gods in Reverence Palace. Some fake gods have already passed away, but their descendants are still in Sky Tribute City. However, both of them are somewhat inhumane, Willow Tree said. Inhumane? Qin Feiyong was taken aback. Yes, they will only keep those who can cultivate. Like those who don't have the talent for cultivation, once they reach the age of 16, they will be chased out of Sky Tribute City. They will be sent out to get married and have children, fending for themselves. However, the two great powers didn't exterminate them either. If the descendants of those who were expelled have talent for cultivation, they can return to Sky Tribute City. Of course, this is only limited to their descendants, Willow Tree said. Why? We're all humans, why do we have to treat them differently? Yu Huang said angrily. This is the way of the world. No one wants to waste time on a worthless person. Willow Tree said calmly. He was obviously used to it. Worthless? Qin Feiyong muttered, a trace of disgust in his eyes. Because he knew the feeling of being expelled better than anyone else. As Yu Huang said, this was a very unfair action. However, in this world there was nothing fair. Everything was decided by the fist. Not long later, the palace master of Fengtian Palace brought a group of people and flew towards Qin Feiyong and the others. Qin Feiyong retracted his gaze and turned to look at the palace master of Fengtian Palace. He didn't know if he didn't look, but when he did, he was shocked. Behind the palace master of Fengtian Palace, there were no less than 50 people. In other words, there were at least 50 false gods in Fengtian Palace. This foundation was too terrifying, wasn't it? 50 false gods. Even the entire Great Qin Empire and Forgotten Continent combined didn't have that many. That's not all. Because I didn't see the Vice Palace Master of Fengtian Palace. I think she should have brought some people with her to guard Fengtian Palace. Willow Tree said in a low voice. Not all. Qin Feiyong sucked in a breath of cold air. If he had such a foundation, what was the Imperial Preceptor? What was Mu Tianyang? He could destroy him with a wave of his hand. The palace master of Fengtian Palace landed in front of Qin Feiyong and smiled. Little brother, are you satisfied with the overall strength of my Fengtian Palace? Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled, asking, They already know our plan? Yes. I already told them yesterday. The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded. Yesterday? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. Is there a problem? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was suspicious. Qin Feiyong asked, Forgive me for asking, but can the people here be trusted? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was taken aback, then said, So you're worried about the news being leaked? You can rest assured because everyone here is my family. Everyone is your family? Qin Feiyong was surprised. You misunderstood me. What I meant is that Fengtian Palace is a big family. Everyone is one family. The palace master of Fengtian Palace said. Since we're all family, Why did you expel those who don't have the talent for cultivation from the Fengtian Palace? Don't you think it's a slap in the face for saying such words? Yu Huang said with disdain. The palace master of Fengtian Palace's smile froze, shaking his head. I'm just saying that you don't understand the human world. Stop bragging. You haven't seen a pig run, but you haven't eaten pork. I'm still wondering, even if you keep them, how much land and food can they occupy? Is there a need to be so cruel? Yu Huang laughed angrily. Qin Feiyang said unhappily. Enough, it's other people's business, why do you care so much? I just can't stand their behavior. They're even more cruel than us beasts. Yu Huang snorted coldly. The palace master of Fengtian Palace looked embarrassed and said, although you're a beast, your words are reasonable, making me ashamed. When the black tortoise world is unified, I think this rule should be abolished. That's right. Whether they have cultivation talent or not, they're all humans and should be treated equally. To be able to admit your mistakes and change, you're not hopeless. Yu Huang smiled. Yes. The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded. Qin Feiyang was speechless. What's wrong with this guy? As a beast, he's actually speaking up for the humans? He was sure that the group of fake gods behind the palace master of Fengtian Palace must be muttering in their hearts. This guy is different. Different from the other beasts. However, this could be considered a good thing. After all, there weren't many kind beasts, and it was his good luck to be able to meet one. Seeing that even the palace master of Fengtian Palace was tamed by him, Yu Huang was very proud and shouted, then let's go. The palace master of Fengtian Palace turned to look at the fake gods and shouted, listen, when we reach the Vanga League, don't talk nonsense, attack directly, and leave no one alive. Yes. Everyone nodded. The palace master of Fengtian Palace shouted, open the portal. Everyone opened up a portal. This was to save time. The palace master of Fengtian Palace also opened a portal, and a shocking murderous aura broke out from his body. He waved his hand and shouted, let's go. Everyone stepped into the portal in unison. Qin Feiyang also led Willow Tree and the others into the portal of the palace master of Fengtian Palace. The next moment, a group of people descended on the plains. The plains were extremely vast, and the vegetation was lush. The surrounding mountains were like giant dragons lying on the ground. In the middle of the plains, a huge city stood majestically, covering an area of more than 10 miles. The dark city walls and tall buildings all exuded an ancient aura. However, there was not a single person in the entire city at this moment. It was an empty city. What's going on? Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders scanned the city in surprise. Why is this happening? The palace master of Fengtian Palace, Li Yuan, and a group of fake gods were also frozen in the void. Qin Feiyang turned to look at the palace master of Fengtian Palace and said in a deep voice, this is the Vanga League? The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded. Where are they? Don't tell me they have the ability to predict the future. Qin Feiyang said angrily. How would I know? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was also a little angry. It won't be easy to evacuate such a large city. There's only one explanation. The Vanga League had already received the news and evacuated everyone in advance. That means there are spies in your palace master of Fengtian Palace. Qin Feiyang looked at the palace master of Fengtian Palace and said. Hearing this, the hearts of Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders sank as they scanned the fake gods around the palace master of Fengtian Palace. Impossible. The palace master of Fengtian Palace shook his head. Qin Feiyang said. Then tell me, why would they disappear all of a sudden? The palace master of Fengtian Palace remained silent as he looked at Li Yuan and the other fake gods. My lord, you can suspect others, but you can't suspect me. I've followed you for so many years. Don't you know what kind of person I am? Li Yuan hurriedly said. The others also spoke up to prove their innocence. The palace master of Fengtian Palace turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked, could there be another reason? We're the only ones who know about this plan. How could there be another reason? Qin Feiyang said angrily. What's going on? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was furious. Everything was ready, but the people were gone? It was as if there was a beautiful woman standing in front of him with her pants down and spear ready, but the woman suddenly told him that she had a relative and couldn't do it today. It was extremely uncomfortable. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and looked at the palace master of Fengtian Palace. He asked, "Did the Vanga League ask you for people in the past 2 days?" Ask for people? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was taken aback and asked, "Who?" "The Grand Deacon, of course," Qin Feiyang said. "No." The palace master of Fengtian Palace shook his head. "That's right. The Vanga League must have known that the Grand Deacon went to your palace master of Fengtian Palace. Even if they didn't know, they must have guessed it. He hasn't returned for 2 days. They must be worried. But they didn't do anything. They didn't even ask. What does this mean? It means that they already know that the Grand Deacon is in my hands and gave up on rescuing him. So I'm sure that there's a Vanga League spy in your palace master of Fengtian Palace." Chapter 1602. Who is it? Get the hell out here. The palace master of Fengtian Palace was furious as he roared at the group of fake gods beside him. Everyone looked at each other with a perplexed expression. Why would the spy admit it? Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. "Do you have any ideas?" The palace master of Fengtian Palace thought to himself. Qin Feiyang looked at the group of people's expressions as his eyes flickered. He had to find the spy. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to hide anything from the Vanga League in the future. Wait. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's eyelids twitched. If the Vanga League received the news, would the people of the Tianyang Empire also receive the news? Because this plan also included eliminating the Tianyang Empire. He quickly looked at Willow Tree and said in a deep voice, "Go to Tianyang City immediately and take a look." Go to Tianyang City? Willow Tree was stunned. Go now. Qin Feiyang shouted. Willow Tree nodded and quickly opened a portal to leave. The palace master of Fengtian Palace glanced at Willow Tree's back and transmitted his voice. "Little brother, do you suspect that the Vanga League also informed the Tianyang Empire?" "I can't rule out that possibility. Because if it were me, I would do the same." Qin Feiyang thought to himself. After all, the Tianyang Empire wasn't weak. Faced with the alliance between him and the palace master of Fengtian Palace, the Vanga League would definitely form an alliance with the Tianyang Empire. "Where is the Soul-Sealing Valley?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Over there." The palace master of Fengtian Palace pointed to the end of the plain. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he transmitted his voice. "Take me there and let the others stay here." "Okay." The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded and turned to Li Yuan and the others. "You guys stay here. I will go to the Soul-Sealing Valley with this little brother." "Yes." Everyone replied respectfully. Qin Feiyang glanced at Yu Huang and the 6 elders. He thought to himself, "You guys stay here as well. See if anyone will find an excuse to leave when Palace Master and I leave." "What do you mean?" Yu Huang was suspicious. If someone finds an excuse to leave, it's very likely that they have a guilty conscience. In that case, that person might be a spy. Qin Feiyang thought. Understood. Yu Huang nodded imperceptibly. Qin Feiyang nodded to the palace master, and the palace master immediately led Qin Feiyang to the Soul-Sealing Valley. Not long after, Qin Feiyang saw the entrance of a valley. The entrance was very small. Beside the entrance stood a tall stone tablet with 3 bold words engraved on it. Soul-Sealing Valley. This place must be empty as well. Before they even entered, the palace master of the Sky-Conferring Palace said decisively. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. The palace master of the Sky-Conferring Palace said, "There used to be someone guarding this stone tablet, but now there's no one, which means that they have already left." Qin Feiyang nodded. Looking at the entrance of the Soul-Sealing Valley, he said, "I'm very curious about this Soul-Sealing Valley. Let's go in and take a look." "You can't go in." The palace master of the Sky-Conferring Palace shook his head. "Why?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Because there's a strange power in the Soul-Sealing Valley that can seal the soul of a living being. Once the soul is sealed, it will immediately petrify and turn into a stone statue. Only pseudo-gods can enter." The palace master of the Sky-Conferring Palace said. "So scary?" Qin Feiyang was shocked. "Yes. Although we can't go in, we can go to the sky and see the appearance of the Soul-Sealing Valley." The palace master of the Sky-Conferring Palace said. Qin Feiyang nodded, followed behind the palace master, and rushed into the sky above the entrance. The appearance of the soul-sealing valley immediately appeared in front of Qin Feiyong's eyes. This soul-sealing valley was very big. Even with Qin Feiyong's current cultivation, he was still unable to see the whole picture. Inside the valley, there were mountains and countless small valleys. These small valleys crisscrossed and were extremely complicated, like a maze. However, in the valley, other than humans and beasts, there were everything else. For example, flowers and trees, medicinal herbs, spirit essence, rivers, streams. If he didn't know in advance that this was a big forbidden area of the Black Tortoise realm, Qin Feiyong would definitely think that this was just a slightly more complicated maze valley. Will it really be petrified? Qin Feiyong asked. He always felt that the words of the Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace were somewhat unbelievable. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace did not reply, but turned and flew away. Qin Feiyong looked at him suspiciously. Soon, a beast roar sounded. Following closely, the Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace flew over with a War Emperor-level beast. Above the entrance, the Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace did not say anything and directly threw the beast into the soul-sealing valley. The moment the beast fell into the soul-sealing valley, its huge body was immediately petrified. Looking at this scene, Qin Feiyong took a deep breath. This was too terrifying. Now you believe it. You also saw my sincerity. If I had the intention to harm you, I wouldn't have told you this and directly brought you in. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace laughed. Qin Feiyong nodded and asked, then how to remove the petrification? Leaving the soul-sealing valley, the petrification will naturally disappear. However, if it is broken by someone in the state of petrification, then even a pseudo-god will die on the spot. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace said. When Qin Feiyong heard this, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat, his eyes full of fear, and asked, then this petrification ability, what is the cause of it? No matter what, there was a source. This petrification must have come from something. I don't know. I'm afraid that only the Vanga League knows the reason. The Guardian of the Miracle should also know. When I had nothing to do, I also thought about this matter. According to my guess, the biggest possibility is that there is a terrifying demon hidden in the soul-sealing valley. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace said. Demon. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace laughed. Little brother, don't think about it now. If you really want to find the answer, wait until you break through to the pseudo-god level. Qin Feiyong smiled bitterly, glanced at the soul-sealing valley, and said, let's go back. Whoosh. The two of them returned the way they came. But suddenly, Qin Feiyong stepped on the brakes and suddenly turned his head to look at the soul-sealing valley. What's wrong? The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace was shocked. Qin Feiyong was silent, scanning the valley, his eyes flashing coldly. But gradually, he frowned, and a trace of suspicion crept up on his face. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace asked anxiously, little brother, don't scare me. What's wrong? I suddenly felt that there seemed to be a gaze spying on me in the soul-sealing valley. Qin Feiyong transmitted his voice. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace was stunned and said, if there is really someone spying on me, even you can feel it. But just now, I didn't feel it at all. Is it an illusion? Qin Feiyong murmured. It must be an illusion. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace said. No. I don't believe in illusions. Qin Feiyong shook his head, turned to look at the Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace, and said, why don't you go in and take a look? Seeing that Qin Feiyong was not joking, the Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace glanced at the soul-sealing valley for a moment and nodded. Okay, I'll go in and take a look. You have to be careful. Okay. Qin Feiyong replied. The Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace immediately turned into a stream of light and rushed into the soul-sealing valley. Just as the Palace Master of the Sky Conferring Palace disappeared into the depths of the soul-sealing valley, a sinister laugh suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyong's mind. Kid, you're very sensitive. There was a piercing chill in the voice. Qin Feiyong quivered and shouted. Don't be nervous. If I wanted to attack you, you would have been turned into a stone statue. The voice said. Stone statue? Qin Feiyong was stunned. The next moment, he couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. He glanced around the void, his eyes full of vigilance, and said, "Are you?" "That's right. I am the source of the mysterious power in the soul-sealing valley." The voice said proudly. "Who are you? How can you have such a heaven-defying ability? What's your relationship with the Vanga League?" Qin Feiyong thought. "You're asking too many questions." The voice sounded in Qin Feiyong's mind again, full of impatience. "Then tell me, who are you?" Qin Feiyong said. "I am an existence that you will never be able to imagine. It's not convenient to reveal it now. When you break through to the false god realm, come here and find me. I will give you a great opportunity." The mysterious voice said. "Great opportunity?" Qin Feiyong was stunned and sneered. "I don't believe there is a free lunch in this world." "Indeed. If you want to gain something, you have to pay first." The mysterious voice laughed. Qin Feiyong said, "Then what do you want me to do now?" Whoosh! A black light suddenly swept out from a small valley and floated at the entrance of the soul-sealing valley. Qin Feiyong's pupils contracted, because this black light actually gave him an extremely strong sense of danger. "Don't be afraid. This is a wisp of my divine sense. It won't hurt you." The mysterious voice sounded again. Divine sense. Qin Feiyong was shocked. According to the willow tree, only a true war god's divine sense can leave the sea of consciousness. In other words, this mysterious person is a war god. Facing a war god's divine sense, how could he dare to be careless? The most important thing was that with Lu Xingchen as an example, he was worried that this divine sense would take over his body. So he didn't dare to be careless at all. What a cautious young man. The mysterious person smiled helplessly and said, "I swear in the name of the war god that this wisp of divine sense will never hurt you. Come down, let's talk. I don't even know who you are. Do you think I will believe your oath?" Qin Feiyong sneered. The mysterious person said, "Then what do you want to believe?" "I won't believe you no matter what." Qin Feiyong shook his head. What a joke. Keeping a war god's divine sense by his side was tantamount to a ticking time bomb. Not to mention this mysterious person also had the ability to petrify. If he wasn't careful, he might be smashed to pieces. The mysterious person was silent for a while and said, "Come, I really won't hurt you. And my divine sense can't leave the soul-sealing valley. Come quickly." This voice seemed ordinary, but it seemed to carry a magical power. Qin Feiyong's expression immediately became dull and his eyes became unfocused. At this moment, Chapter 1603. Hee hee. The mysterious man's hideous laughter echoed in the void, but Qin Feiyong turned a deaf ear to it. Finally, he stepped into the soul-sealing valley and stopped in front of that wisp of divine consciousness. However, unexpectedly, his body was not petrified. But he still did not wake up. However, suddenly, that divine consciousness went into Qin Feiyong's forehead. And it went straight to Qin Feiyong's sea of consciousness. A tearing pain immediately engulfed him. Qin Feiyong screamed miserably and woke up immediately. When he found that he had entered the soul-sealing valley at this moment, his expression changed. Without thinking, he endured the pain in his sea of consciousness and immediately retreated. But he was shocked to find that his body seemed to be frozen and could not move. How could this be? Qin Feiyong was surprised. The pain in his sea of consciousness was getting more and more intense. He quickly sensed the situation in his sea of consciousness and his face instantly turned pale. The sea of consciousness could only be opened when one broke through to the false god realm. In other words, before reaching the false god realm, the sea of consciousness was closed. But at this moment, he felt that the wisp of divine consciousness tore his sea of consciousness apart. And that divine consciousness, after entering the sea of consciousness, went straight to his soul. "What do you want to do?" Qin Feiyong's whole body was cold and he roared. "What do I want to do? Of course, I want to take over your body. It's not easy to wait for such a talented young man like you, who also contains the power of the purple gold dragon blood. Of course, I won't let you go. But your vigilance makes me a little annoyed. But no matter how vigilant you are, I have a way to deal with you." The mysterious man laughed again and again. "Damn it!" Qin Feiyong was shocked and angry. He said, "There are so many false gods in the Vanga League, why don't you look for them but me?" They are false gods. In my current state, it will take a lot of effort to take over their bodies and I may even be counterattacked, so I can't take the risk. The mysterious man grinned. Before his voice died away, Qin Feiyong felt a tearing pain in his soul. Obviously, his divine sense had already begun to seize the body. But suddenly, the ancient castle appeared in his sea of consciousness. Dark light surged and exuded a mighty divine might. That strand of divine sense was immediately confined. Following closely, the ancient castle left Qin Feiyong's sea of consciousness with that strand of divine sense, and floated in front of Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong also immediately took out an essence soul pill and put it into his mouth. How is this possible? This castle. Meanwhile, his divine sense struggled madly, and his words were filled with terror that couldn't be dispersed. You want to possess me? Aren't you too naive? Qin Feiyong sneered. The mysterious man roared, What exactly is this ancient castle? How is it so terrifying that even my petrification is useless against it? The first thing it wanted to do was to petrify the castle and Qin Feiyong, but it found that it couldn't. The petrification effect was blocked by the power of the ancient castle. It's a divine object that you can't afford to provoke. Qin Feiyong said. The divine sense stopped struggling and was silent for a long time before it laughed. Actually, this lord was just joking with you before, don't take it seriously. Joking? Qin Feiyong snorted. It was trying to seize his body, and it was still a joke? Did it think that he was a 3-year-old child that was so easy to fool? This lord knows that you definitely won't believe it, but this lord can tell you a secret. This secret may be useful to you, the mysterious man said. What secret? Qin Feiyong asked disapprovingly. The mysterious man said, This lord has a way to break the devil mark. What? Qin Feiyong's spirit was lifted. Break the devil mark? Didn't that mean that Willow Tree and the 6 great elders could also leave the Black Tortoise world with him? His heart suddenly became hot. Wait. If this person really had a way to break the devil mark, then he could just leave directly. Why did he have to seize his body? Wasn't this superfluous? The mysterious man said anxiously, I really found a way to break it, please believe me. Then why didn't you leave? Why did you want to seize my body? Qin Feiyong said. It's a long story. I was sealed in the Soul Sealing Valley. As long as the seal is not broken, I can't leave the Soul Sealing Valley, let alone leave the Black Tortoise world. The mysterious man sighed. Qin Feiyong said, So you want to seize my body and use it to escape the Black Tortoise world? Yes. After seizing the body, I can cut off the connection with the main body, and then I can break free from the shackles of the seal. This is the only way. The mysterious man said. So, you're serious about seizing my body, and you said that it was just a joke? Qin Feiyong said angrily. The mysterious man smiled awkwardly. Qin Feiyong asked, Who sealed you here? An extremely terrifying existence. Even the god of battle is like an ant in front of him. The mysterious man said. Even war gods are ants? Qin Feiyong was shocked. Then how strong is this person? Above war gods? Please help me. I promise, I won't seize your body again. The mysterious man said with a hint of pleading in his tone. Then tell me, if you don't seize my body, how can I help you? Qin Feiyong said. Find someone and let me seize his body. Then I can leave the Soul Sealing Valley, or even the Black Tortoise world, and leave the divine ruins. The mysterious man said. His tone was full of yearning and desire for freedom. Why should I help you? Qin Feiyong sneered. The mysterious man hurriedly said, I can tell you the way to break the devil mark. Then you tell me first. Qin Feiyong said. If this person wasn't lying, then it was really a good thing for him. That's impossible. If I tell you, what if you don't tell me? I promise, after I succeed in seizing your body, I will tell you immediately. The mysterious man said anxiously. Promise? You think I will believe you? In my opinion, you don't have a way to break the devil mark at all. You just want to use this point to seize my body. Qin Feiyong said. The mysterious man went silent. What? You have nothing to say? Don't think you can fool me just because I'm young. Just be honest, what do you want? You haven't given up on seizing my body, right? Qin Feiyong sneered. Sigh. Why are you so suspicious? I really do have a way to break it. And I promise it will be effective. The mysterious man sighed. I'm wondering, why are you looking for me? Although you don't dare to seize the body of a false god from the Vanga League, there are still many disciples in the Vanga League. Although they can't enter the soul-sealing valley, you can confuse them like you did to me and make them enter the valley. In this way you can seize their bodies, right? Qin Feiyong frowned. My ability to confuse is limited. It will only be effective when I'm close to the soul-sealing valley. And the Vanga League, because they know of my existence, has long set a rule that no disciples are allowed to go near the soul-sealing valley. As for looking for you, it's because I eavesdropped on the Vanga League people talking about you. They said that you are a very scary young man. The mysterious man said. Eavesdropping? What do you mean? You have nothing to do with the Vanga League? Qin Feiyong was stunned and asked. No. When I was sealed here, there were no humans in the Black Tortoise realm. The mysterious man said. No humans? Could it be that you were sealed by the creator of the miracle? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Yes and no. It was a ferocious beast that sealed me. It was the creator's spiritual pet. Its strength is very scary, the mysterious man said, and his tone carried a strand of anger that couldn't be dispelled, as well as fear. The creator's spiritual pet. Qin Feiyong's eyes trembled. If what the mysterious man said was true, then this creator was too scary. Even his spiritual pet could seal a god of war. How terrifying was his strength? How did the Vanga League people find you? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. It's a long story. The first leader of the Vanga League was only at the peak of the 9-star combat emperor realm when he first entered the soul-sealing valley. At that time, I bewitched him and seized his body. But the result was the same as you. A divine artifact appeared and saved him. But that divine artifact was still a little inferior to your ancient castle. It could only block the petrification effect, but it couldn't imprison me. When I saw that the situation was not good, I immediately ran away. This person has been looking for me. Later, he also found my original body, but my original body was sealed, and he could do nothing. So he established the Vanga League here. The mysterious man sighed. I see. Qin Feiyong nodded and asked, where are the first leader and the divine artifact now? The first leader has already passed away. But that divine artifact has been passed down for generations, and now it is in the hands of the current leader. Little brother, it's fate that we met. Please, can you help me? After the mysterious man finished speaking, he begged. Tell me the way to break the devil mark first. I'll give it a try. If it really works, I'll believe you. At that time, I can find you a physical body for you to seize. Qin Feiyong said. Really? The mysterious man was surprised. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded. Then can you help me find a young man as outstanding as you? It would be best if there is also purple gold dragon blood. The mysterious man said. Your requirements are quite high. It's impossible to find someone with purple gold dragon blood. However, I know 2 outstanding people, and they are now in the Black Tortoise world. One of them has even awakened a rare battle soul, the all-seeing eye. Qin Feiyong smiled. These 2 people were naturally Mu Qing and Zhuge Mingyang. All-seeing eye. The mysterious man was shocked and said excitedly, I want the person who awakened the all-seeing eye. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, I'll think of a way, but the prerequisite is that your method really works. It will definitely work. Because I heard this from the Guardian himself. In fact, breaking the devil mark is not difficult, but it is not easy either. The mysterious man said. What do you mean? Qin Feiyong was puzzled. The mysterious man said, You should know that there are many demigod-level beasts in the Black Tortoise world, right? Qin Feiyong nodded. Then you should also know that the Guardian has ordered that no one is allowed to kill those demigod-level beasts, right? The mysterious man said again. I heard this from the people of the Feng Tian Palace. It seems that this is indeed the rule set by the Guardian. Qin Feiyong said. The mysterious man asked, Then do you know why it set this rule? Why? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. Chapter 1604. But suddenly, Qin Feiyong was stunned. Could it be that the way to remove the devil's mark lies in those pseudo-god beasts? You're really smart. I'm getting more and more eager to have your body. That's right. The way to remove the devil's mark is to eat their hearts. As long as you eat one of their hearts, the devil's mark will naturally be removed. The mysterious man said. It's that simple? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Yes. However, although it's simple, who dares to kill a pseudo-god beast? I'm afraid that before you can kill it, the guardian will have already arrived. The mysterious man said. Then why didn't you tell the Vanga League? I believe that if they knew about this, even if the guardian ordered them to, they would definitely take the risk to hunt the pseudo-god beasts. Qin Feiyong said suspiciously. You think I haven't tried? I once told a pseudo-god in the Vanga League in private. He also wanted to test me and give it a try. But in the end, before he could succeed, the guardian arrived and killed him. Fortunately, he was killed instantly and didn't say anything. Otherwise, when he revealed his intention to hunt the pseudo-god beasts, the guardian would definitely use rule force to kill me. Since then, I didn't dare to tell anyone else. The mysterious man said. Qin Feiyong frowned. After pondering for a moment, he nodded. All right, I will find a chance to try. If it works, I will come to you again. Then you have to be careful. The guardian can use rule force. Even if it's a pseudo-god beast, it can be killed instantly. In addition, if you fall into the hands of the guardian, don't betray me. The mysterious man said. Don't worry. Even if I die, you will live well. By the way, where are you sealed in Soul Sealing Valley? Qin Feiyong asked curiously. The deepest part. The mysterious man said. Fengtian Palace's palace master went in. Will he find you? Qin Feiyong asked. The mysterious man said, even if he finds me, he can't do anything because no one can break the seal. Last question. Do you have a demon imprint on your body? Qin Feiyong asked. No. The mysterious man said. How is this possible? Qin Feiyong was stunned. I really didn't. You'll understand when you see me in the future. The mysterious man said. Qin Feiyong nodded, stepping out of the Soul Sealing Valley and putting away the ancient castle. The mysterious man's divine sense immediately regained its freedom and said, I'll wait for you here. After saying that, he turned around and left. Wait. Qin Feiyong looked at the rapidly disappearing divine sense. Suddenly, he thought of something and said loudly, I thought of another problem. What is it? The mysterious man said. I'm here to destroy the Vanga League, but all the members of the Vanga League have moved. Do you know when they moved? Qin Feiyong said. Yesterday morning. The mysterious man said. Yesterday morning. Qin Feiyong frowned and said again, since you can eavesdrop on their conversation, do you know who tipped them off? The mysterious man thought for a while and said, I heard from the leader and deputy leader of the Vanga League that someone did tip them off. It was someone from the Fengtian Palace, but they didn't mention who it was. Just as I expected. Qin Feiyong murmured. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He looked at the divine sense and said, Thank you. Although he didn't know who it was, at least he was sure that the spy was in the Fengtian Palace. I suddenly thought of something that you might be interested in. The mysterious man said. What is it? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. There's a place of inheritance hidden in the Soul Sealing Valley. There's a kind of control-type divine skill called the puppet technique. I remember that the deputy leader of the Vanga League once brought a woman there. She seemed to be the leader of the main tower. In the end, they succeeded in getting the inheritance. The mysterious man said. The place of inheritance? The puppet technique. Qin Feiyong was stunned. He was wondering why the leader of the main tower and the deputy leader of the main tower had the puppet technique at the same time. It turned out that it was a kind of inherited divine skill. After coming back to his senses, Qin Feiyong said, I'm interested, but can I get the inheritance? That depends on your luck. The next time you come, I'll take you to the place of inheritance. After the mysterious man finished speaking, his divine sense disappeared into the depths of the Soul Sealing Valley. The puppet technique. Qin Feiyong's eyes lit up. It would be good if he could get this divine skill. Because the puppet technique could directly read the other party's memory and control the other party's mind to make them lose consciousness. This was a trump card. Whoosh! After a while, a stream of light flew out of the soul-sealing valley and landed next to Qin Feiyong. It was the leader of the Fengtian Palace. How is it? Qin Feiyong asked. Not a single person. Even the medicine field has been moved away. But in the deepest part of the soul-sealing valley, I found a stone tower. It seems to be sealing something inside? The leader of the Fengtian Palace said. What's sealed? Qin Feiyong pretended to be surprised. I don't know. I've tried but I can't break the seal. The leader of the Fengtian Palace shook his head. Qin Feiyong was curious and said, I really want to go in and take a look. I'm afraid you won't have the chance because you can't go in. The leader of the Fengtian Palace smiled. Yeah. Qin Feiyong nodded and smiled. He didn't mention the appearance of the mysterious man and said, Besides the stone tower, what else did you find? Nothing. The leader of the Fengtian Palace shook his head. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed. He didn't find the place of inheritance. It seemed that this place of inheritance was hidden very well. Whoosh! At this moment, there was a sound of breaking air behind them. The two turned their heads and saw the willow tree flying toward them like lightning. Young master. The willow tree landed in front of Qin Feiyong and bowed. How is it? Qin Feiyong asked. The willow tree glanced at the leader of the Fengtian Palace. There's no harm in saying it. Qin Feiyong said. The willow tree said in a deep voice, Tianyang City has also become an empty city. I've searched the entire city and didn't find a single child. Damn it! The leader of the Fengtian Palace was furious. Qin Feiyong looked at the leader of the Fengtian Palace and said, Two major forces moved at the same time. Now you should believe that there's a spy in your Fengtian Palace. Go and investigate immediately. We must find this bastard. The leader of the Fengtian Palace said. Do you have a way? Qin Feiyong asked. The leader of the Fengtian Palace frowned and shook his head with a bitter smile. To be honest, I really don't know how to investigate. Qin Feiyong pondered for a while and said, Let's go and meet up with everyone first. So, the three of them rose into the air and quickly flew to the sky above the city. Palace Master, what's the situation? Is there anyone in the soul-sealing valley? Li Yuan and the others immediately surrounded him. No. The leader of the Fengtian Palace shook his head. Yu Huang and the 6 elders also walked to Qin Feiyong's side. Did anyone leave? Qin Feiyong secretly asked. Yu Huang said, No one left even half a step, and no one sent a message. You can keep your composure? It seems that this person isn't easy to find. Qin Feiyong muttered. Yu Huang transmitted his voice. Do you think it's possible that the spy isn't among these people? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Didn't the willow tree say so? There are still some false gods guarding the Fengtian Palace. Could this spy be one of them? Yu Huang said. Qin Feiyong's eyes trembled. He turned to the palace master of the Fengtian Palace and asked, How many false gods are guarding the Fengtian Palace now? 3. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace said and transmitted his voice. Wait, are you suspecting them? I can't rule out that possibility. Qin Feiyong secretly said. No, I won't. They are all my relatives. One is my wife, and the other 2 are my eldest son and second son. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace transmitted his voice. You have 2 sons? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Yes. They are much older than Chang'er, and they both broke through to the false god realm a few decades ago. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace said. If that's the case, then the spy is among the group in front of us. Qin Feiyong thought for a while and transmitted his voice. Let's go back first, and cooperate with me later. We should be able to find this person. How? The palace master of the Fengtian Palace asked. Qin Feiyong said, No matter what I say, you agree. Okay. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace nodded and shouted, Let's go back. Bas. Immediately. Everyone opened the portal and walked in one after another. But Qin Feiyong didn't move. He had been observing everyone. When the last person entered the portal, he opened it and walked in with the willow tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders. He was worried that the spy might hide behind them and take the opportunity to sneak away when everyone returned to the Fengtian Palace, so he left last. Who did it? Bastard, come out! But when Qin Feiyang arrived in the sky above the Fengtian Palace, angry roars suddenly sounded. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace roared. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was surprised. When he lowered his head and looked at the sacred mountain below, his face suddenly froze. The sacred mountain below had been turned into ruins. There was also a tragic aura in the air. What's going on? Wasn't this place still fine when we left? What happened? Willow Tree was surprised. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace shouted, Li Yuan, go to the Fengtian city and take a look. Li Yuan suddenly said, Palace master, look at the Fengtian city, it's also destroyed. Hearing this, everyone immediately turned to look at the Fengtian city. As expected, the originally bustling Fengtian city was now nothing. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace looked at Li Yuan and shouted, Go and take a look. Li Yuan turned into a stream of light and flew towards the Fengtian city like lightning. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace also released his divine sense and spread it in all directions. Instantly, it covered the entire sacred ground. Why is it like this? Soon, the palace master of the Fengtian Palace's face turned pale as he roared, Madam, where are you? What? Madam is gone. What about the 3 young masters? The group of fake gods looked at the palace master of the Fengtian Palace in shock. I can't find them either. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace shook his head. Damn it, damn it. Which bastard is it? Come out and die. The group of fake gods roared, killing intent soaring into the sky. Willow Tree looked at everyone and turned to Qin Feiyang, asking, Young master, do you know what's going on? I don't know. Qin Feiyang shook his head. His eyes were extremely sinister as he said, However, I have a bold guess. What guess? Willow Tree asked. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace and the others also heard Qin Feiyang's words and turned to look at him. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, I think it should be the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire. What do you mean? Yu Huang said. After the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire found out about our plan, they beat us at our own game. When we went to the Soul Sealing Valley, they came to the Fengtian Palace to eliminate everything here. Qin Feiyang said. This. Everyone was stunned. Palace master, you must find the spy and avenge Madam, the 3 young masters and everyone. A black-clothed elder roared. Qin Feiyang knew this person. He was the 2nd elder of the Fengtian Palace. A few days ago in the Qingyang Mountains, Qin Feiyang destroyed his cultivation. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace said coldly, 2nd elder, don't worry, I will definitely find this person and cut him into pieces. Whoosh. At this moment. Chapter 1605. The continuous bad news almost made the palace master of Fengtian Palace collapse. Suddenly, an old woman walked to the side of the palace master of Fengtian Palace, glanced at Qin Feiyang, and whispered a few words in the palace master's ear. What's that look? Why does it look a little unfriendly? Willow Tree muttered. The old woman's eyes made him feel uneasy. After the palace master of Fengtian Palace heard this, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Qin Feiyang and his group. Qin Feiyang frowned and looked at the palace master of Fengtian Palace. If you have something to say, say it. Don't hide it in your heart. The palace master of Fengtian Palace said, This matter is too strange. I can't help but suspect that it might be your scheme. Me? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, You suspect that I colluded with the Tianyang Empire and the Vanga League. That's right. The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded and said, Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? Qin Feiyang looked at the old woman and asked, This is what you secretly told the palace master just now? Yes. The old woman nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at the old woman, his eyes flickering. Why are you looking at me? Is my suspicion wrong? The old woman said. Your suspicion is not wrong. But your brain can't. Qin Feiyang sneered. How dare you? The old woman was furious. Let's not talk about the Vanga League first. Who doesn't know about the grudge between Great Qin and the Tianyang Empire? How could I collude with the Tianyang Empire? Anyone with a little brain wouldn't think so. Qin Feiyang said. The old woman was speechless. The palace master of Fengtian Palace frowned and felt that it made sense. Qin Feiyang turned to look at the palace master of Fengtian Palace and said, "Remember what I said to you in the Vanga League? As long as you trust me, I promise to find this spy for you." The palace master of Fengtian Palace's expression was uncertain. "The spy is in your Fengtian Palace. Fengtian Palace and I are only in a cooperative relationship. So, whether or not I want to find this spy doesn't have much to do with me. But if we don't find this spy, our cooperation will be terminated immediately. If we don't get rid of this spy, the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire will find out about our plan no matter how detailed and perfect it is. I don't want to waste time here with you," Qin Feiyang said. The palace master of Fengtian Palace was silent for a long time before he said, "Are you sure you can find this spy?" 100%. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with certainty, "All right. I'll believe you for now. What do you want to do?" The palace master of the Celestial Submission Palace gritted his teeth and asked with a nod. The old woman hurriedly said, "Palace Lord, you have to think twice. Don't fall into his trap. The Palace Lord has already agreed, yet you're still trying to stop him. Could it be that you're feeling guilty?" Qin Feiyang said. "I'm not the spy. Why would I feel guilty? I just don't want to see the Palace Lord walk into your trap step by step. After all, you're not a trustworthy person," the old woman said angrily. "How am I not trustworthy? Do you know me very well? Let me tell you. You've been trying to sabotage us time and time again. I can't help but suspect that you might be the spy," Qin Feiyang said. "Ridiculous. I'm the 9th elder of Fengtian Palace. How can I be a spy?" the old woman said angrily. "Then cut the crap. I don't have to work with Fengtian Palace. If you piss me off, I'll leave right now," Qin Feiyang said angrily. The old woman looked at him with disdain. She wanted to say something, but the palace master of Fengtian Palace suddenly shouted, "Shut up. From now on, Qin Feiyang's words are my words. Everyone has to listen to him." The old woman's pupils shrank. She stopped talking and went silent. The palace master of Fengtian Palace looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "I choose to trust you. You'd better not disappoint me. Speak." Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at the black-robed old man. "Do you remember how I controlled you in Qingyang Mountain Range?" The black-robed old man nodded. "What controlled you was a divine art called the enslavement seal. Whether it's a human or a beast, once controlled by the enslavement seal, their soul will be bound. With the enslavement seal, not only can I control a person's life and death, I can also peek into their inner thoughts," Qin Feiyang said. "What?" The black-robed old man's face changed. The 3rd elder, 4th elder, and 5th elder were also controlled by the enslavement seal. When they heard Qin Feiyang's words, their faces turned pale. They didn't expect such a terrifying divine art to control them. The palace master of Fengtian Palace looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "You mean to let them be controlled by the enslavement seal?" "No. I won't use the enslavement seal this time. Because the enslavement seal still has its shortcomings. If the spy is prepared or has a strong will, he might not be able to find out," Qin Feiyang said. "Then if you don't use the enslavement seal, what are you going to use?" The palace master of Fengtian Palace was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, "What I'm going to use is a secret technique that is more vicious than the enslavement seal. I believe you should know about the puppet technique." "Puppet technique? Are you talking about the puppet technique that the vice leader of the Vanga League mastered?" the palace master of Fengtian Palace asked. Qin Feiyang nodded. "You also know the puppet technique?" The palace master of Fengtian Palace was surprised. "Yes. When I killed the master of the pagoda, I learned the puppet technique from her. As long as the people here are all under my control and I can read their memories, we will be able to see who the spy is immediately," Qin Feiyang said. "Puppet technique?" Willow Tree was stunned and said, "Young master, why didn't I know that you learned the puppet technique?" The 6 elders also looked at him suspiciously. "You really believe it?" "I'm just bluffing them. The purpose is to make the spy panic." Qin Feiyang snickered inwardly. Then, he carefully observed everyone's expression. Suddenly, he keenly noticed that the old woman who claimed to be the 9th elder had a trace of panic in her eyes. Could she be the spy? So that's how it is. Willow Tree and the others heard Qin Feiyong's words and suddenly understood. The master of the pagoda also knows the puppet technique? Why didn't I know about this? At the same time, the palace master of Fengtian Palace looked at Qin Feiyong in surprise. This matter is absolutely true. The 6 great elders can all testify. Qin Feiyong said. The master of the pagoda does know the puppet technique. And this puppet technique was given to her by the vice leader of the Vanga League. It's just that only a few people know about this. As the former elders of the pagoda, the words of the 6 elders were naturally persuasive. Qin Feiyong must have secretly kept the Yiglao woman. He found that after hearing the words of the 6 elders, the old woman looked even more panicked. Palace Master, this must be a trap. You see, if you agree, we will all be controlled by him. At that time, we will have to listen to his orders. If he goes back on his word, we can only watch helplessly. The old woman said anxiously. The palace master of Fengtian Palace looked at Qin Feiyong and said, This is indeed too risky. Is there no other way? No. Qin Feiyong shook his head and said, I'll say it again. If you trust me, you will agree. I can't agree. Palace master, this is not child's play. You must be careful. This time, not only the old woman, but the others also objected. Because they were indeed worried that this might be a trap set by Qin Feiyong. Willow Tree raised his eyebrows and snorted, Not only did we fail to be a good person, but we also ended up with a bad reputation. Young master, let's go. Yes, let's go. Anyway, this spy is a scourge of Fengtian Palace. It has nothing to do with us. Moreover, we have Chang Shui. Even without Fengtian Palace, we can still destroy the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire. It's just a little tiring. Yu Huang nodded in agreement. Qin Feiyong looked at the palace master of Fengtian Palace. The palace master of Fengtian Palace also lowered his head, struggling with his thoughts. It seems that you still don't dare to trust me. Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed. He cupped his hands and said, If that's the case, then I won't ask for a rebuff. Goodbye. After saying that, he turned around and took out a portal. Wait. The palace master of Fengtian Palace's eyes trembled as he hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong turned to look at him. The palace master of Fengtian Palace clenched his hands and said, I believe you. Palace master. The old woman and the others were burning with anxiety. The palace master of Fengtian Palace suddenly turned his head to look at the old woman and the others, and shouted, If anyone dares to say another word, then I have reason to suspect that he is a spy. Everyone lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound, but their faces were full of dissatisfaction. Li Yuan glanced at the crowd and said in a deep voice, Even the palace master trusts Qin Feiyong. What are you afraid of? Hurry up. Don't waste time. After saying that, he was the first to walk in front of Qin Feiyong. The palace master of Fengtian Palace raised his eyebrows and shouted, Hurry up. Alas! The old man in black let out a long sigh and also walked in front of Qin Feiyong, standing next to Li Yuan. The others also moved in 2s and 3s, and walked in front of Qin Feiyong one after another. The old woman was also walking towards Qin Feiyong. At this moment, her expression was very calm. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't find anything unusual about her. However, just before, Qin Feiyong had already targeted the old woman. Because this person's previous series of actions were too strange. First, he fanned the flames. Then he revealed a panicked look. These were all signs of a guilty conscience. Therefore, Qin Feiyong paid special attention to this person. Even though the old woman looked calm, he noticed that she was glancing around out of the corner of her eyes. It gave people the feeling that she was looking for a way out. Can you all hurry up? As long as you have a clear conscience, what are you afraid of? Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed, and he shouted impatiently. The people who were still behind, hearing this, hurriedly sped up and ran towards Qin Feiyong. The old woman also sped up her pace, but there was a trace of anxiety in her eyes. Qin Feiyong secretly smiled. He could basically conclude that this person was a spy, and he transmitted his voice. Palace Master, get ready to take action. The Palace Master of Fengtian Palace was shocked and secretly said, Who is it? Whoever runs away later, it's that person. Qin Feiyong transmitted his voice. Before his voice died away. Chapter 1606. The old woman thought that no one was paying attention to her, so she thought she could escape. However, just as she took a step forward, the palace lord of Fengtian Palace also dashed forward and stopped in front of the old woman. Where do you think you are going? What's going on? The old woman was surprised. How did he react so quickly? Surround her! Qin Feiyong shouted. Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders dashed out and surrounded the old woman. What's going on? Li Yuan and the others were still in shock. They couldn't accept it. The 9th elder was a spy? Qin Feiyong swept his gaze over the group of people and shouted, What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and go! The group of people quivered and immediately ran over, surrounding the old woman so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. 9th elder, why are you here? What did the Vanga League give you to betray us? We are a family. Li Yuan and the other 8 grand elders looked at the old woman with pained expressions as they cried out. What are you talking about? I just thought of something and need to take care of it. What? Are you suspecting that I am a spy? The old woman said with a dumbfounded expression. Pretend. Keep pretending. Qin Feiyong walked step by step to Lu Mu's side, his face filled with a cold smile. Qin Feiyong, don't talk nonsense. Isn't it just the art of puppetry? What am I afraid of? Come, I will let you control me and read my memories. The old woman had a very angry look on her face as she aggressively walked towards Qin Feiyong to prove her innocence. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed. He secretly sent a message to Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders. Be careful. She is desperate. Lu Mu was shocked. He transmitted his voice. You mean, she's just putting on an act to trick us so that she can make a move on you? Yes. Be careful, she will self-destruct. Qin Feiyong thought. Upon hearing the word self-destruct, Willow Tree and the others immediately became vigilant. The self-destruction of a quasi-divinity was no joke. The scene of Gao Yuan blowing himself up in the Qingyang Mountains 2 days ago was still vivid in his mind. During the conversation, the old woman had already arrived in front of Qin Feiyong. The distance between the two of them was only 2 to 3 meters. For a quasi-divinity, this distance was nothing more than a walk in the park. Suddenly, her eyes flashed with murderous intent. She stretched out her arm to grab Qin Feiyong. The palace master of Fengtian Palace was taken aback. His expression changed abruptly as he hurriedly shouted, Stop! However, the old woman turned a deaf ear to him, and her old face was full of ridicule. However, in the depths of Qin Feiyong's eyes, there was also a hint of mockery. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, Willow Tree took a step forward and stood in front of Qin Feiyong, sending a palm strike towards the old woman. Yu Huang and the 6 elders also made a move together. The old woman was stunned. How could she react to this? Seeing this, Qin Feiyong said in his heart, This is a good opportunity. Don't give her a chance to self-destruct. Then let's kill her directly. Yu Huang said ferociously. Taking advantage of the old woman's distraction, Willow Tree took the lead and sent a palm strike towards the old woman's chest. Puff! The old woman immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and her face turned pale. At the same time, Yu Huang also took out the snake scale, and the 6 elders also took out their battle swords. The sharp edge tore through the sky and madly slashed towards the old woman. Want to kill me? However, although Willow Tree's palm strike severely injured the old woman, it also brought her back to reality. Hee hee, go to hell with me. She laughed sinisterly, and a destructive aura immediately rushed out of her body. Self-destruct. The palace master of Fengtian Palace, Li Yuan, and the others immediately changed their expressions. Yu Huang, Willow Tree, and the 6 elders were also terrified. They immediately stopped and retreated to Qin Feiyong's side. Looking at everyone who was like a frightened bird, Qin Feiyong couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then he looked at the palace master of Fengtian Palace. At this moment, he had already taken Li Yuan and the others to hide in the space divine item. Qin Feiyong was a little annoyed. Why were a group of fake gods so timid? Willow Tree urged. Young master, let's go to the castle quickly. Yu Huang and the 6 elders also had anxious looks on their faces. But Qin Feiyong was indifferent and stared at the old woman without blinking. Palace Master and the others have already escaped. Why are you still not running? Aren't you afraid of death? The old woman laughed. Qin Feiyong said lightly, if you want to self-destruct, hurry up. Don't dawdle. The old woman's face darkened. What? You don't dare? Do you think I'm them? Do you think you can scare me just by pretending? Qin Feiyong sneered. Pretending? Willow Tree and the others were stunned. The Palace Master of the Heavenly Palace and the others who were hiding in the Space Divine item were also stunned. Then, a trace of shame couldn't help but crawl up the faces of the group of people. They weren't even afraid of a war king, but they were like birds that were startled by the twang of a bow. But now, they didn't dare to go out. Because if the old woman really self-destructed, then they would all be annihilated. Hurry up, self-destruct. Let me tell you, you have to self-destruct today. Qin Feiyong shouted. Don't force me. The old woman roared, her face full of anxiety. That's right. Her self-detonation was indeed just to scare everyone. Even. She had already planned her escape route. But what she never thought was that Qin Feiyong would actually see through her plan. So what if I force you? Today, you can either self-destruct here or die in our hands. Choose for yourself. Qin Feiyong said. The old woman was furious to the extreme, and the destructive aura that rushed out from her body became more and more terrifying. If you don't dare to self-destruct, then why are you still pretending? Qin Feiyong's face was full of disdain, and he actually took the initiative to walk towards the old woman, his aura aggressive. The old woman looked flustered and kept retreating. Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders saw this and hurriedly followed behind Qin Feiyong. His body was dripping with cold sweat. The courage of this young master was beyond imagination. Facing the self-destruction of a false god, he could still be so calm. Seeing Qin Feiyong approaching, the old woman became more and more flustered and shouted, Don't come any closer, or I will really self-destruct. Then hurry up. No one is stopping you. What's wrong? No temper. Qin Feiyong's eyes became more and more aggressive. The old woman collapsed. How could she meet such a difficult kid? He was not even afraid of death. What should she do now? Since you don't dare to self-destruct, then stop for me. Qin Feiyong shouted angrily. The old woman's body trembled, looking at Qin Feiyong. Her eyes were full of struggle. Finally, she squatted in the void in despair, holding her head and crying bitterly. The destructive aura also gradually dissipated. Obviously, the line of defense in her heart had completely collapsed. Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders looked at each other and immediately rushed up, ready to attack the old woman. Stop! But Qin Feiyong suddenly shouted. What? Several people were stunned and turned to look at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. They were a little puzzled. Such a good opportunity. Why stop them? The Palace Master of Fengtian Palace also appeared at this time. However, only he came out alone. The others were still in the Space Divine object. Why don't you destroy her first? The Palace Master of Fengtian Palace also looked at Qin Feiyong in confusion. Now you know how to destroy her? What were you doing just now? I really didn't expect that a group of fake gods would be cowards. Especially you. Qin Feiyong turned to look at Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and the 6 elders, and said, Didn't I warn you in advance to prevent her from self-destructing? Willow Tree and the others nodded. Then what did you do? Seeing her self-destruct, even your souls were scared away. Is that all you have? In the situation just now with your strength, knowing the situation, you could destroy her sea of qi when she self-destructed. But you chose to retreat and missed an opportunity. I also know that Gao Yuan's self-destruction has traumatized you. But sometimes, there is only one opportunity. Once missed, there will never be another. I hope you can remember. Qin Feiyong said. Of course. Willow Tree and the others lowered their heads in shame. Even the Palace Master of Fengtian Palace was blushing, too ashamed to show his face. Qin Feiyong shook his head, walked to the old woman and said, You must have your difficulties. The old woman didn't answer, but just cried bitterly. Qin Feiyong pondered for a moment and asked, Is it because of the puppet technique? How do you know? The old woman suddenly looked up and stared at Qin Feiyong, her eyes full of surprise. It's easy to tell. If you were really a member of the Vanga League, you would have self-destructed without hesitation. But you didn't. And a fake god is squatting here and crying, which means you have a lot of grievances. Combined with your previous behavior, I've come to the conclusion that you're under the control of the Everlasting Alliance, and have no control over yourself. Qin Feiyong said. The old woman stared blankly at Qin Feiyong, nodded after a long time, and said, Back then, before I stepped into the fake god realm and became an elder, I was already controlled by the Vanga League. I didn't want to work for them, but I had no choice. I didn't want to die. Qin Feiyong asked, If you were given a chance, would you turn over a new leaf? Of course. The old woman nodded without hesitation. Who is the person controlling you? Qin Feiyong asked. The deputy chief of the Vanga League. The old woman said. Is he nearby right now? Qin Feiyong asked. No. The old woman shook her head. That's good. Qin Feiyong nodded. He formed a seal with both hands, and the seal of slavery quickly appeared. If the deputy chief of the Vanga League was not nearby, he could help the old woman break the puppet technique without worry. On the contrary, if the deputy chief was nearby, he would have to enter the castle immediately. This was because the puppet technique could make people lose their consciousness. If the deputy chief saw that he could break the puppet technique, he would definitely control the old woman and make her body explode. This is? The old woman looked at the seal of slavery suspiciously. This is the seal of slavery. The seal of slavery can break the puppet technique. Qin Feiyong said. Really? The old woman was stunned and asked hurriedly. It's true. We were controlled by the puppet technique in the past. Young master used the seal of slavery to break it for me. The 6 elders said. I beg you, please help me. I really don't want to do anything that will hurt everyone. All these years, whenever I think of what I did for the Vanga League, I want to commit suicide to atone for my sins. The old woman exclaimed. Qin Feiyong said, Destroy your cultivation first. The old woman did not hesitate. She slapped her lower abdomen, and her sea of energy shattered on the spot. Chapter 1607. At the same time. In a desert in the Black Tortoise world, sand dunes stood tall as the wind howled, filling the sky with yellow sand. 2 middle-aged men stood side by side on a sand dune, looking at the green mountains outside the desert, their eyes filled with anger. One of them had a square face, wearing a black robe 7 feet tall, his long hair fluttering in the wind. The other man had a round face, about 1.75 meters tall, and was quite skinny. He wore a white robe, his hair was white, giving off a sense of vicissitudes. The aura from these 2 men was extremely strong. I never thought that our Vanga League would fall to such a state. This is a shame that can never be washed away. The middle-aged man in black said in a deep voice. His tone was filled with anger. No rush. We still have one more pawn. If the 9th elder of the Fengtian Palace fails to escape, he will self-destruct. At that time, not to mention Qin Feiyong's group, even the people of the Fengtian Palace will be wiped out. At that time, without the Fengtian Palace, our Vanga League will unify the Black Tortoise world. The middle-aged man in white said, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Puh. However, before he could finish his sentence, the middle-aged man in black beside him suddenly trembled and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. What happened? The middle-aged man in white was shocked. Impossible. How could this be? The middle-aged man in black did not answer and kept muttering. His face was filled with disbelief. Tell me what's going on? The middle-aged man in white shouted. The middle-aged man in black turned to look at the middle-aged man in white and said, the 9th elder's puppet technique was broken by someone. Obviously. He was the deputy chief of the Vanga League. What? The middle-aged man in white was shocked and angry. The puppet technique is a divine art. How could it be broken by someone? It's not impossible. At this time, a young man in purple flew to the 2 men. You are? The 2 men turned to look at the young man in purple suspiciously. The young man in purple said, Mu Qing, from the outside world. When the 2 men heard this, their eyes lit up. The middle-aged man in white said, You came from the outside world, so you should know Qin Feiyong very well, right? More than that. He and I. A cold light flashed in Mu Qing's eyes. The two of them looked at each other. Although Mu Qing didn't finish her sentence, they already understood what she meant. The deputy chief of the Vanga League said, "You said that it's not impossible. What do you mean?" "Qin Feiyang has mastered a control-type divine art called the Seal of Slavery. If this divine incantation can overcome the Blood Soul technique, I believe it can also overcome your puppetry technique," Mu Qing said. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The deputy chief of the Vanga League said angrily. "I didn't think of this before. The most important thing right now is not to study whether the slavery seal can break the puppet technique, but to leave this place immediately," Mu Qing said. "That's right. Ninth Elder's puppet technique has been broken. She will definitely betray us. Pass down the order immediately. Let's continue into the depths of the desert," the middle-aged man in white said. Feng Tian Palace. Not only did Qin Feiyang break the old woman's puppet technique, but he also took control of her. After all, the old woman had betrayed them before, so they couldn't completely trust her. This point, Qin Feiyang didn't hide it. The old woman and the palace master of Feng Tian Palace knew about it. The two of them had no objections. However, the palace master of Feng Tian Palace had a request. When Qin Feiyang left the Black Tortoise realm, he had to remove the old woman's seal of slavery. Qin Feiyang asked, "Where are the people of the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire now?" The old woman said, "They have all entered the Undead Mountain." Undead Mountain. The palace master of Feng Tian Palace's pupils shrank. "Is the Undead Mountain very scary?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. "Yes. It is said that the Undead Mountain is boundless, and there are many undead wandering in it. And the masters of these undead were basically the strongest who dominated a region," the palace master of Feng Tian Palace said in a deep voice. "Undead?" Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "Have you guys been to the Undead Mountain?" "Yes. Once the Vanga League's leader and I joined forces to enter the Undead Mountain to explore, but we didn't find the end even after half a year. On the contrary, we were almost killed by the storm inside," the palace master of Feng Tian Palace said. "Storm?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Yes. Inside the Undead Mountain is a desert, and there are storms in the desert all year round. The deeper you go, the stronger the storm. The place where the Vanga League's leader and I went, the storm was strong enough to kill an ordinary false god," the palace master of Feng Tian Palace said. "Damn. Even a false god can be killed." Yu Huang swallowed his saliva. Qin Feiyang said, "Did you encounter the so-called undead?" "I didn't." The palace master of Feng Tian Palace shook his head. "Do the undead really exist?" Yu Huang asked. "They do." Qin Feiyang nodded. "You've seen them?" Yu Huang was surprised. "Yes. I once saw a lot of lively skeletons in a place called the Nine Nether Yellow Springs," Qin Feiyang said. Willow Tree was surprised. "The underworld is still there?" "You've been to the underworld too." This time, it was Qin Feiyang's turn to be shocked. "I haven't been there, but I heard people from the Tianyang Empire talk about this place. It's said that there are many treasures there. There seems to be Hell's Gate, Bridge of Helplessness, Sea of Bitterness, Paramitha, and so on." "Are these all true?" Willow Tree asked. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "But I really didn't find any treasures. Maybe my cultivation was too weak at that time, so I couldn't detect the existence of these treasures." "Amazing. I really want to go and take a look," Willow Tree said. "I've been to the underworld too," the palace master of Feng Tian Palace suddenly said. "What? You've been there?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. "Well, it's a long story. I'll tell you slowly when I have time," the palace master of Feng Tian Palace said and looked at the old woman. "Everything here, was it done by the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire?" The old woman nodded. Her eyes were full of self-blame. The destruction of the palace master of Feng Tian Palace was caused by her. Hearing this, the palace master of Feng Tian Palace suddenly burned with anger. He grabbed the old woman's clothes and shouted, "Then were my wife and Chong are also killed by the Vanga League?" "I don't know." The old woman shook her head. "I don't know." The palace master of Feng Tian Palace's eyes suddenly surged with killing intent. "Calm down. Qin Feiyang grabbed the palace master of Fengtian Palace's arm and said, "The Venga League and the Tianyang Empire are not stupid. They will definitely keep your wife and son alive so that their plan will fail and they can use them to threaten you." The palace master of Fengtian Palace trembled and nodded. "What you said makes sense." After saying that, he looked down at the old woman again and said word by word, "If anything happens to my wife and Chang'er, I will not let you go." The old woman's eyes trembled. After being together for so many years, she was very clear about the temper of the palace master of Fengtian Palace. If he said it, he would definitely do it. The palace master of the Celestial Submission Palace snorted and let go of the old woman. Then, he lowered his head and glanced at the broken ground below. He clenched his fists and muttered, "Blood for blood. I will make you pay." After saying that, he turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Go to the Undead Mountain immediately? I don't have much time. I have to catch up with them as soon as possible. Can you open the portal in the Undead Mountain?" Qin Feiyang asked. The palace master of Fengtian Palace shook his head. "Then this is difficult." Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead and said, "Let's go in and take a look first." The palace master of Fengtian Palace immediately opened the portal. Qin Feiyang sent the 6 great elders to the castle, leaving only the willow tree and Yu Huang outside. The old woman also asked the palace master of Fengtian Palace to send the spatial divine object. Then, the 3 of them and the beast entered the portal. However, just as Qin Feiyang and the others were about to disappear, another gray figure broke through the air and entered the portal like lightning. In front of a mountain range, Qin Feiyang and the others appeared out of thin air. The gray-white figure also appeared beside them. If it wasn't Zhuge Mingyang, who else could it be? "Who are you? You actually dare to run into the palace master of Fengtian and spy on us?" When the palace master of Fengtian Palace saw Zhuge Mingyang, his killing intent rose. Qin Feiyang, Willow Tree, and Yu Huang looked at Zhuge Mingyang, and also frowned. They never thought that this guy would be hiding in the palace master of Fengtian. Zhuge Mingyang chuckled, glanced at Qin Feiyang, looked at the palace master of Fengtian Palace, and said, "I am here to help you." "Help us?" The palace master of Fengtian Palace raised his eyebrows. Zhuge Mingyang no longer paid attention to the palace master of Fengtian Palace, and looked at Qin Feiyang with a sinister smile. "Do you remember that I once said that no matter how I change, I will always be a person of the great Qin, so to get rid of the Heavenly Sun Empire, I, Zhuge Mingyang, will not shirk my duty." "Are you saying this to a ghost? I reckon that even a ghost wouldn't believe it." Yu Huang sneered. "That's right. I'm sure that you have other intentions." Willow Tree also followed. Zhuge Mingyang smiled. Qin Feiyang frowned. "Are you following me to find an opportunity to anger me and force me to kill you?" "You're so smart." Zhuge Mingyang laughed. "Force you to kill him? What do you mean?" The palace master of Fengtian Palace looked at Qin Feiyang with a dumbfounded face. Zhuge Mingyang raised his eyebrows. "This is between Qin Feiyang and me, what are you talking about?" "You're courting death." The palace master of Fengtian Palace's eyes turned cold. "You may not be able to kill me. You can try if you don't believe me." Zhuge Mingyang looked at him playfully. Unscrupulous. The palace master of Fengtian Palace narrowed his eyes slightly, revealing a dangerous signal. But in the end, he retracted his gaze and said, "I don't have time to play with you now. Yes. If you don't hurry up and chase after them, I'm afraid that your 3 idiotic sons will lose their lives." Zhuge Mingyang joked. The palace master of Fengtian Palace suddenly looked at Zhuge Mingyang. "Yesterday evening, I had already entered Fengtian Palace and haven't left. So when the people from the Venga League and the Tianyang Empire went to massacre your Fengtian Palace, I was there. I saw with my own eyes that they kidnapped your wife and son. Your wife was very sensible and didn't resist. But your 3 sons relied on your support and were unruly, thinking that the Venga League and the Tianyang Empire wouldn't dare to hurt them, but in the end, they were tortured quite miserably." Chapter 1608. You were there. The palace master of Fengtian Palace was stunned and said angrily, "Then why didn't you help them?" "I was wondering why I had to help them." "Do I have anything to do with you?" Zhuge Mingyang didn't understand. The palace master of Fengtian Palace was speechless. "That's right. They weren't related, So why would this person help the palace master of Fengtian Palace? However, at least now he could be sure that his wife and 3 sons weren't dead. The group turned around and looked at the mountain range in front of them. Apart from the palace master of Fengtian Palace and Willow Tree, Qin Feiyang, Zhuge Mingyang, and Yu Huang all had a look of surprise in their eyes. The mountain range in front of them was extremely vast. However, there wasn't a single weed in the huge mountain range. There were blooming flowers everywhere, colorful and pleasing to the eye. Between the flowers, there was a cedar tree every few hundred meters. It was very thick. Some of the tree trunks couldn't be surrounded by more than a dozen people. The branches and leaves were lush like large umbrellas, towering into the sky and exuding a majestic vitality. Yu Huang asked in bewilderment, "Are these flowers and cedar trees naturally grown here?" "No. Every time someone is buried here, we will plant a cedar tree. That's because the cedar tree represents everlasting youth. It also represents our respect for those sages. Similarly, the cedar tree is the guardian of this place." The palace master of Fengtian Palace said. Yu Huang was shocked. "You mean that there are as many fake gods as there are cedars here?" "Yes." The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded. Qin Feiyang walked into the mountain range step by step and stood above a mountain ridge, looking ahead. As far as the eye could see, there were thousands of cedar trees. In other words, there were at least thousands of fake gods buried under this land. It was hard to imagine how long the Black Tortoise realm had existed. Yu Huang saw an extremely large cedar tree. The tree trunk was so thick that over 20 people holding hands would be able to encircle it. TSK. It ran up and said in surprise, "I estimate that this cedar tree is at least 10,000 years old." "Don't go near the cedar." The palace master of Fengtian Palace suddenly changed color. "What is it?" Yu Huang turned to look at him suspiciously. "It said that the dead false gods are buried under these cedars." Willow Tree said. "It's not a rumor, it's a fact. These cedar trees are their tombstones, and they represent them," Limu said. Fengtian Palace Master said. "What?" When Yu Huang heard this, he immediately jumped up and hurriedly bowed to Xueqi, saying, Sorry to disturb you, please don't take offense." After saying that, he quickly retreated to Qin Feiyang's side. Wasn't the undead mountain range the place where fake gods were buried? But why didn't he see any tombstones? It turned out that these cedars were their tombstones and tombstones. "What are you afraid of? I don't believe that there are really undead here." Zhuge Mingyang pursed his lips. Fengtian Palace Master raised his eyebrows and said, "You can choose not to believe some things, but you must be respectful." "What's there to be respectful of a dead person?" Zhuge Mingyang smiled disdainfully. Clatter. However, before his voice died away, the cedars in the entire mountain range suddenly shook, and the sound was deafening. "What's going on?" Yu Huang was immediately scared and burrowed into Qin Feiyang's arms. Willow Tree also immediately took out the 7-star sword and stood in front of Qin Feiyang, looking at the cedars warily. Zhuge Mingyang's face was also filled with shock. Looking at the situation, could it be that these cedars could hear him? At the same time, Fengtian Palace Master also changed his expression and hurriedly bowed, saying, "He just came here and didn't mean to offend you. Please don't blame him." When Fengtian Palace Master's voice died away, the cedars, under the incredulous gaze of Qin Feiyang and the others, actually stopped shaking. "What do you mean? Could it be that those dead false gods are still alive in these trees?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "You're just playing tricks." Zhuge Mingyang glanced at the cedars and suddenly snorted from his nose. A grayish-white false god power rolled out, carrying an astonishing sharpness, and rushed in all directions. "No." Fengtian Palace Master's expression changed drastically and he hurriedly shouted. However, it was too late. Because no one had expected Zhuge Mingyang to suddenly make a move. It was too late to stop him now. Clatter. The cedars seemed to have sensed the danger and shook again. "Retreat!" The Imperial Conferring Palace's Palace Master looked at Qin Feiyang and shouted. Then, he took the lead and left the mountain range. When Qin Feiyang saw this, he glanced at the cedar trees. Although he didn't understand what was going on, he still stopped the Heavenly Palace Lord's words. He brought Lu Mu and Yu Huang away and rapidly retreated from the mountain range. However, Zhuge Mingyang was indifferent. The corners of his mouth even curled up into a mocking smile. This was a mockery to Qin Feiyong and the others. He glanced at the cedars around, his eyes full of contempt, and said, "A bunch of dead people still dare to come out and stir up trouble. You really don't know what you're doing. Today, I'll make you disappear completely." The grayish-white false god power rushed in all directions. The originally colorful and dazzling flowers were instantly destroyed in a large area. But suddenly, the cedar trees in the entire mountain range spewed out patches of green essence qi. They gathered together and surged towards Zhuge Mingyang like a wave. What is this? It doesn't seem to be battle qi or false god power, but it gives me a great sense of danger. Qin Feiyong was surprised. Before he finished speaking, the essence qi condensed into a huge enchantment, trapping Zhuge Mingyang and the false god power inside. Boom! The false god power hit the enchantment. But the enchantment only trembled a few times and quickly calmed down. Damn! Yo Huang's eyes widened in disbelief. He had already experienced Zhuge Mingyang's strength, especially the false god power, which was naturally stronger than the false god power of others. But now, it couldn't break the enchantment set up by the cedars? Could it be that these cedars had also become gods? What was going on? Zhuge Mingyang was dumbfounded. Although these cedars haven't become gods, they are no different from gods. Feng Tian Palace Master seemed to have seen through Yu Huang's mind and said in a deep voice, "What do you mean?" Yu Huang was surprised. Feng Tian Palace Master said, "You may not know how we planted the cedars. We planted the roots of the cedars on the bodies of the ancestors." What? Yu Huang's expression changed. Feng Tian Palace Master said, "In other words, they were born with the divine blood and flesh of the ancestors." Growing the cedars with the divine body? Yu Huang and Qin Feiyong looked at each other. Isn't this too outrageous? Because they absorb the essence of the divine blood and flesh, they are constantly evolving. Now, they are no longer ordinary cedars. They are a group of divine trees comparable to divine iron. And they have already given birth to consciousness. Feng Tian Palace Master said. Consciousness. Qin Feiyong was shocked. According to the ancient records, not only humans and beasts, but everything in the world could give birth to consciousness. Consciousness was equivalent to a human's soul. But other than humans and beasts, they were usually called spirits. If a flower gave birth to consciousness, it was usually called a flower spirit. For example, a divine weapon was called a spirit. A tree was called a tree spirit. But all of this, in his opinion, was just a legend, but he didn't expect it to be true. It was happening in front of him now. How could he not be surprised? Walala! In the mountain range, the cedar trees kept swaying as if they were very angry. The emerald green essence was endless. Zhuge Mingyang stood in the barrier, and his face gradually became gloomy. "I want to see what kind of waves you can make." Suddenly, he smiled sinisterly. Dragon roars echoed. A shocking aura of death erupted within the barrier. Damn it! He actually used a divine art. This is a provocation. It's an offense. Feng Tian Palace Master said angrily. What will happen? Qin Feiyong asked. Humph. Feng Tian Palace Master snorted and said disdainfully, "Not to mention him, even if I am a level 10 false god, I can't break the barrier set by the cedars." So powerful? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Their horror is far more than that. The Great Deacon's sky-breaking rod is in your hands, right? Even the revived sky-breaking rod can't break the barrier. Feng Tian Palace Master sneered. This, Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. This was too exaggerated. Yu Huang also didn't believe it. But the next moment, they had witnessed how terrifying the barrier was. Boom. Zhuge Mingyang cast a divine art and blasted the barrier. But in the end, the barrier didn't show any signs of breaking except for shaking. Terrifying, really terrifying. Yu Huang felt her heart pounding when she saw this. Suddenly, its eyes turned and looked at Qin Feiyong. "Do you think these cedars can kill him?" Qin Feiyong was stunned and looked up at the cedars. "No. The cedars won't attack any living thing, they're just passive defense. However, if you completely annoy them, they can trap a person here for the rest of their life." Feng Tian Palace Master said. "Trapped here for the rest of my life?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. This was good news. Now this Zhuge Mingyang, killing him was not the right thing to do. Then the best way was to be trapped somewhere. The Black Tortoise realm was undoubtedly the best place. Because once the half-a-year limit was exceeded, Zhuge Mingyang would be controlled by the devil imprint. At that time, he wouldn't be able to leave the Black Tortoise realm and naturally wouldn't be able to go out and stir up trouble. Thinking of this, Qin Feiyong's mind became active. Looking at Zhuge Mingyang, his eyes flashed and he laughed. Don't you think you're very strong? Why can't you do anything to a bunch of cedars? What a joke. I haven't shown my real skills yet. Zhuge Mingyang was so angry that he laughed. Then hurry up and show it. After all, you're a fake god now. If you can't even do anything to a bunch of cedars, it'll be embarrassing if word gets out. Qin Feiyong laughed. He was deliberately angering Zhuge Mingyang. Chapter 1609. All right. I'll show you my strongest move. You'll definitely be shocked too. Zhuge Mingyang sneered. Clang. As he waved his hand, a battle sword appeared in the air. The battle sword was more than 100 feet long and was surrounded by raging flames. The flames were grayish-white and released a sharp aura that could destroy the world. What kind of divine art is this? I've never seen it before. Qin Feiyong was surprised. Judging from the aura, the power of this divine art seemed to be no lower than his Fire Phoenix technique. 6 words killing formula, sever formula, kill. Zhuge Mingyang roared. The battle sword cut through the sky and slashed at the barrier. 6 words killing formula? Sever formula. Qin Feiyong was stunned. He knew about the 6 words divine art. But what the hell was this 6 words killing formula? Accompanied by a loud bang, the battle sword's aura was monstrous and it tore a crack in the barrier. The terrifying sword aura went straight for a cedar tree in front of them. Clang! The sword aura slashed at the cedar tree and produced a deafening sound of metal. And there were sparks bursting out. However, the cedar tree was not cut by the sword aura. The sword aura dissipated after 3 inches into the tree. It's really comparable to divine iron. Yu Huang was shocked. Indeed. Such a terrifying killing formula, I guess even a false god wouldn't dare to take it head-on. Qin Feiyong nodded. Wait, look at the hole in the tree. Willow Tree suddenly exclaimed as if he had seen something unbelievable. His eyes were full of horror. Qin Feiyong and Yu Huang looked over and their expressions immediately became extremely exaggerated. Their eyes were wide open and their mouths were wide open. It was enough to stuff an egg in. The hole left by the sword aura on the tree trunk was actually dripping with blood. That's right. That was blood. A tree was actually bleeding? What a shocking thing this was. Even if they were knowledgeable, they had never heard of such a mysterious thing. Bleeding. Palace Master Feng Tian murmured in shock. Don't you know? Willow Tree asked. In the past, whether it was Feng Tian Palace or the Vanga League, we wouldn't mess around here. That's why we didn't know that these cedars would bleed. Feng Tian Palace Master shook his head. So that's all there is to it. Zhuge Mingyang, on the other hand, was in high spirits, his face full of contempt. He swung his sword again, preparing to shatter the barrier. Rustle. Crash. Rumble. But suddenly, the surrounding cedar trees shook crazily as if they had gone crazy. Moreover, the cedar trees in the distance actually rose from the ground and broke through the air in groups. Zhuge Mingyang froze on the spot. What kind of monsters were these damned cedars? In the end, accompanied by a series of loud rumbling sounds, all of the cedar trees took root around Zhuge Mingyang. They were densely packed and formed an impenetrable giant cage. Let's go and take a look. Palace Master Feng Tian shouted. The group of people swept to the sky above the cage like lightning. Once in the sky, Qin Feiyong, Willow Tree, and Yu Huang couldn't help but gasp. There were more than thousands of cedar trees gathered here, probably tens of thousands. They lowered their heads and looked at Zhuge Mingyang inside. Zhuge Mingyang was trapped in the middle, and the barrier that was torn apart by the sword had been closed. Zhuge Mingyang was holding the sword at the moment, crazily hacking at the barrier. But now, it didn't work at all. It was like an indestructible barrier. It turns out that this is the real power of the cedar trees. I'm afraid that except for Chang Shui and the castle, No other divine arts or divine artifacts can break this barrier. Willow Tree murmured. This scene was truly breathtaking. Palace Master Feng Tian said, "This means that Zhuge Mingyang has completely angered the cedar trees here. I'm afraid he can only stay here for the rest of his life." There was a gloating tone in his words. Good. Qin Feiyong grinned. Palace Master Feng Tian was stunned and said suspiciously, "Isn't he a member of your great Qin? Why is it a good thing?" "Although he is a member of the great Qin Empire, he is a great threat to me and the greatest threat to the great Qin Empire," Qin Feiyong said. In the past, the greatest threat to great Qin was Mu Tianyang. But now, in his opinion, Mu Tianyang was no longer a threat, and Zhuge Mingyang was a greater threat. "I see." Palace Master Feng Tian nodded in realization. In the cage, seeing that he was unable to break the barrier even after a long time, Zhuge Mingyang couldn't help but start to get anxious. He raised his head to look at Qin Feiyong above and roared, "Are you planning to just stand there and watch the show?" "No, no, no." Qin Feiyong waved his hand. Zhuge Mingyang said angrily, "Then hurry up and help. We still have to hunt down the people of the Heavenly Sun Empire. We can't waste time here." "Of course I'll go hunt down the people of the Heavenly Sun Empire. But only us, not you." Qin Feiyong smiled. "What do you mean?" Zhuge Mingyang's heart sank. "Isn't it obvious? You stay here and play with these cedar trees." Yu Huang joked. "Bastard. I came to help you with good intentions, but you're leaving me in the lurch. Are you even human?" Zhuge Mingyang was driven mad and roared endlessly. "Thank you for your kindness, but there's no need to trouble you. We can handle a mere Heavenly Sun Empire. Goodbye." Qin Feiyong chuckled. Then, he turned around and rushed into the depths of the mountain range. "You reap what you sow." The Palace Master of Fengtian Palace sneered, then took a step forward and instantly landed beside Qin Feiyong. "Goodbye. Good luck. No need to send us off. We'll go on our own. Just stay here and enjoy your life. Don't worry about us." Willow Tree and Yu Huang smiled at Zhuge Mingyang, then turned and chased after Qin Feiyong without looking back. "Bastard." Zhuge Mingyang's angry roar immediately came out of the cage, echoing between heaven and earth for a long time. However, Qin Feiyong and the rest turned a deaf ear to it. After half an hour of rushing, they finally passed through the mountains and arrived above the desert. Woo-woo! In the desert, tornadoes could be seen everywhere, swirling up yellow sand. Due to the lack of water, the climate here was particularly dry and stuffy. The Palace Master of Fengtian Palace glanced at the desert, then turned to Qin Feiyong and said, "You're too slow, let me take you." Qin Feiyong nodded and said, "Let the ninth elder come out first." The Palace Master of Fengtian Palace waved his hand, and the old woman immediately appeared. Her sea of qi had been restored. Qin Feiyong looked at the old woman and said, "Did the Vanga League tell you where they are going?" "Yes. They said that once they enter the desert, they will keep going deeper. They also said that if my identity is accidentally exposed, I should find a way to escape and meet up with them." The old woman said, "The desert is so big, even if we know that they went deeper, we can't find them." Willow Tree said, "Indeed. Looking for someone here is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, they set off yesterday. After a day and night of running, who knows where they are now?" Yu Huang said, "No." Qin Feiyong waved his hand and said, "They can't be too far away from us." "Why do you say that?" Yu Huang was suspicious. Although the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire started moving yesterday, the fake gods of the two forces just massacred the Palace Master of Fengtian not long ago. So judging from the time, they haven't been in the desert for long. Qin Feiyong said, "It's still hard to catch up with them. After all, they also have auxiliary divine arts." Willow Tree said. Qin Feiyong said, "They have a lot of people, so there will be delays on the way." "Not necessarily. The Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire also have divine spatial items, so they can send everyone else to the divine spatial items." The Palace Master of Fengtian Palace said, "The Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire have so many people. Do they have such a large divine spatial item?" Qin Feiyong frowned. "The Emperor of the Tianyang Empire has a very large divine spatial item that can accommodate millions of people. The palace master of Fengtian Palace said. Then how many people do the two forces have? Qin Feiyang asked. The Vanga League has about the same number of people as the palace master of Fengtian Palace, about 50 to 60,000. The Tianyang Empire has a lot of people, probably more than 1 million. The palace master of Fengtian Palace thought for a while and said, Then this is really bad news. Let's not waste any time, we have to hurry. Qin Feiyang said. The divine spatial item of the Emperor of the Tianyang Empire could accommodate millions of people. The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded and waved his hand, sweeping up Qin Feiyang and the others. He then used an auxiliary divine art and disappeared in a flash. Deep in the desert, above a certain sand dune, 3 figures were moving as fast as lightning. One of them was Mu Qing. The other was Yan Shenhou of the Tianyang Empire. The remaining person was an old woman with white hair. Her body was stooped and she was holding a walking stick in her hand. However, her eyes were as sharp as an eagle's eyes. It was the old woman who appeared together with the great deacon after Gao Yuan self-destructed. And her identity was not simple. The second deacon of the Vanga League. At this moment, Mu Qing, on the other hand, stared ahead with a strange glint in her eyes. A moment later, the light in his eyes dissipated and his brows were tightly knitted together. How is it? Yan Shenhou saw this and quickly asked. The second deacon also looked at him nervously. Mu Qing looked at Yan Shenhou and then at the second deacon and sighed. They really caught up. How far are they? The second deacon's eyelids twitched and asked. Not far. If we stand still, they'll catch up to us in less than half an hour. Mu Qing said. Then what should we do now? Yan Shenhou looked at the second deacon and asked in a panic. Why are you panicking? The second deacon raised his eyebrows. Yan Shenhou suddenly shrunk his neck and his eyes were filled with fear. Facing the people of the Vanga League, even he, a deacon of the Tianyang Empire, did not dare to act rashly. Not to mention that the person in front of him was the second deacon of the Vanga League. But Mu Qing was not afraid at all. He looked directly at the second deacon and said, Running away like this is definitely not a long-term plan. The Lord and I don't have time to waste here with you. Before the Devil's Mark appears, we must leave the Black Tortoise realm. So now, we should think of a way to counterattack. Then tell me, facing Qin Feiyang's Chang Shui, how do we fight back? The second deacon was annoyed. Chapter 16:10. I have no choice. Mu Qing shook his head. Then what are you talking about? The only thing we can do now is to stall until he leaves the Black Tortoise realm. I don't believe that he will stay in the Black Tortoise realm forever. The second deacon snorted. Stall? Mu Qing sneered and said, Is this all the Vanga League can do? What did you say? Say it again. The second deacon frowned. How dare he look down on the Vanga League in public? Did I say something wrong? The Vanga League has so many false gods and is one of the dominators of the Black Tortoise realm, but they are being chased by a combat emperor. Don't you think it's funny? Mu Qing said. In fact, he was deliberately angering the second deacon. He wanted to use the Vanga League to get rid of Qin Feiyang. Because whether it was him or Mu Tianyang, they would have to fight with Qin Feiyang sooner or later. Before, Qin Feiyang didn't have any false gods around him, so he wasn't a threat to them. Because there was no way to revive Chang Shui and the castle. But now, there were a total of 8 fake gods around Qin Feiyang. They could revive Chang Shui easily. Although it couldn't be fully revived, it was enough to be invincible. In other words, the addition of Willow Tree and the others directly doubled Qin Feiyang's strength. Boom! Hearing Mu Qing's words, the second deacon suddenly stopped in the void and a terrifying aura immediately rushed towards Mu Qing. Yan Shenhou's face changed and quickly stood in front of Mu Qing. He looked at the second deacon and said, This kid is young and doesn't know anything. I hope you can be magnanimous and not argue with him. He then turned to look at Mu Qing and shouted, Hurry up and apologize to the great deacon. I'm sorry. Mu Qing said faintly, without any sincerity in her apology. The Grand Deacon's face was as dark as water. The aura didn't disappear. Obviously, Mu Qing's repeated provocations had angered her. Instead of showing off, Why don't you think about how to deal with Qin Feiyang? It's not a solution to keep running. There are storms in this desert. There will always be delays. Mu Qing. I won't change my mind. The second deacon coldly snorted. He withdrew his divine might and flew forward. Mu Qing raised her eyebrows. Was it really going to drag it out? Dragging things out was definitely a way, but there was no way to get rid of Qin Feiyang. Mu Qing. If Qin Feiyang catches up to us, I can guarantee that the Eternal Alliance will use us as cannon fodder. They're even using us as cannon fodder. We can't just sit here and wait. We must let the Vanga League and Qin Feiyang go to war. Only in this way can our Tianyang Empire be the biggest winner. Mu Qing said secretly. You mean to let the Vanga League and Qin Feiyang fight, and then we can reap the benefits? Yan Shunho was stunned and asked secretly. Yes. Qin Feiyang is determined to eradicate our Tianyang Empire. You've seen Qin Feiyang's current strength. Our Tianyang Empire is no match for him. And this Vanga League is the best chess piece. Mu Qing sneered. Chess piece? How dare you say that? Yan Shunho was speechless. Why wouldn't I dare? Nowadays, brains are more important than strength. Look at Qin Feiyang. He is merely a combat the arch. Yet, he was able to scare our two factions into fleeing. This is what it means to be smart. Mu Qing said. Isn't it because of Chang Shui? What does it have to do with his brains? Yan Shunho was puzzled. If he doesn't keep Willow Tree and the others by his side, what's the use of Chang Shui? Look at the 6 elders. If it were us, we would definitely kill them. But he didn't. He kept the 6 elders by his side. Look at Yu Huang and Willow Tree. If Qin Feiyang doesn't have brains and means, will they be loyal to him? Mu Qing said. After hearing what you said, it's true. Yan Shunho nodded. Mu Qing sneered. Although the Vanga League is very strong and using them is like playing with fire, but as long as we use them well, they will be a butcher's knife. Yan Shunho was a little moved, and asked secretly. Do you have any plan? Mu Qing pondered for a while, and a flash of light flashed in his eyes, and said, Slow down and let Qin Feiyang catch up. Yan Shunho frowned. Even if we slow down, the desert is so big, will Qin Feiyang know where we are? He can know. Because beside him, there is a wolf whose nose is more sensitive than a dog's. Mu Qing said. Yan Shunho said, Then how do we slow down? There must be a suitable excuse, right? Isn't the excuse right in front of you? Mu Qing looked at the back of the second deacon in front of him and sneered. I offended her just now. You can take the opportunity to teach me a lesson. You? Yan Shunho looked at him in a daze. Mu Qing said, As long as I can achieve great things, I don't care about a little physical pain. Then you bear with it. Yan Shunho secretly said. Come on. Mu Qing said. Yan Shunho took a deep breath and suddenly stopped, and slapped Mu Qing's face. Mu Qing screamed and immediately fell into the desert below like a meteorite. Half of his face was directly deformed and badly mutilated. Blood spurted out and stained the yellow sand. The second deacon heard the movement and turned to look at Yan Shunho suspiciously and asked, What happened? It's still not because of what happened before. Just now, I earnestly taught him to be polite, to know his limits, and not to be rude to a great figure like you. However, not only did he not listen, he even scolded me for being a coward. Second deacon, do you think this arrogant kid should be beaten? Yan Shunho said angrily. Yes. The second deacon lowered his head and looked at the embarrassed Mu Qing. His eyes were full of gloating. Since he deserves it, then I will teach him a good lesson today and let him understand what is respect and awe. Yan Shunho turned in the air and rushed toward Mu Qing. Mu Qing suddenly stood up and said angrily, Are you qualified to beat me? I am your elder. This is my qualification. Yan Shunho said. Elder? I, Mu Qing, do not have cowardly elders. You like to be the Vanga League's lackey. I will not stop you, but from now on, I have nothing to do with you. After Mu Qing finished speaking, he used the perfect auxiliary technique, turned around and quickly flew away. You dare to call us your elder's lackey? Preposterous. Preposterous. Yan Shunho was furious and chased after him. The second deacon smiled coldly and also followed. Mu Qing naturally could not escape. After all, Yan Shenho's cultivation was much higher than his. Of course. This was just a show to begin with. Soon, Yan Shenho caught up with Mu Qing. He stretched out his arm and grabbed Mu Qing's arm and pulled hard. Mu Qing immediately turned around. Yan Shenho did not say anything and directly slapped him. Puff! Mu Qing spat out blood and his face was bloody. Yan Shenho roared. Do you know that you are wrong? What did I do wrong? It is you who are wrong. Think about how prestigious my Tianyang Empire is in the outside world. Who would not be respectful when they hear the name of my Tianyang Empire? But what about you? In the Black Tortoise world, you actually surrendered to the Vanga League and Fengtian Palace. It is really shameful. Mu Qing sneered. Yan Shenho was furious to the extreme. He picked up Mu Qing and slammed him down. Boom! Mu Qing smashed into the desert and yellow sand flew everywhere. Angry out of humiliation? Did I touch your sore spot? Since you dare to do it, why are you afraid of others talking about it? Let me tell you, I used to think that being a member of the Tianyang Empire is a very honorable thing. Proud. You can walk around with your head held high and your chest puffed out. But now I feel ashamed. Mu Qing awkwardly crawled up and glared at Yan Shenho. Bastard! Yan Shenho was furious. Although it was just an act, he couldn't help but be angry when he heard this. He swooped down and landed in front of Mu Qing and immediately punched and kicked Mu Qing. The second deacon stood aside and sneered. Young man, this is the price of not seeing the situation clearly, do you understand? Shut up. What qualifications do you have to preach to me? Mu Qing roared. You dare to talk to me? Even your monarch has to be respectful to me, let alone you. Yan Shenho, if you don't make him kneel down and apologize to me today, none of you from the Tianyang Empire will live. The second deacon looked at Yan Shenho with cold eyes and said gloomily. Lord, please calm down. I will make him kneel down and apologize to you. Yan Shenho's eyes trembled and quickly looked at the second deacon. I, Mu Qing, will only kneel to the heavens, to the earth, to my parents, and to the Lord. You want me to kneel down to her? Dream on. Mu Qing said proudly. Bastard! Yan Shenho shouted. If you want to be a henchman, you can continue. I won't accompany you, goodbye. Mu Qing's eyes were full of ridicule and then disappeared without a trace. Ha! The second deacon was surprised. Yan Shenho patted his head and said, I forgot that he and Mu Tianyang have a spatial divine item. He must be inside it now. What about Mu Tianyang? The second deacon asked. Yan Shenho said, Mu Tianyang is also inside the spatial divine item. What should we do now? The second deacon released his divine sense and quickly captured the traces of the spatial divine item in the void. Boom! In the next moment, divine power rolled out and condensed into a barrier, imprisoning the spatial divine item. Inside the spatial divine item, Mu Tianyang stood in the stone room, looking at the bruised and battered Mu Qing and said, Although it was an act, this Yan Shenho is too ruthless. It's really wronged you. He still only had a vague outline, but compared to before, it was a little clearer. It's okay. Mu Qing waved her hand. Mu Tianyang said, Quickly take the healing pill. Chapter 16:11. Mu Tianyang lowered his head and pondered for a while, then looked at Mu Qing and said, Give me the body. Give you the body? Mu Qing was suspicious. That Yan Shenho, I have long disliked him, so I will take the opportunity to teach him a lesson. Mu Tianyang said. Mu Qing said, You mean, control my body and go out to fight with Yan Shenho? Mu Tianyang nodded. Good. Mu Qing did not hesitate at all. Mu Tianyang was stunned and asked, Aren't you afraid that I will take the opportunity to take over your body? If the Lord wanted to take over my body, he would have already done it. Why wait until now? Moreover, with my insignificant strength, I can't stop the Lord. Of course, if the Lord really needs my body, just say the word and I will give it to you immediately. Mu Qing laughed. I really didn't misjudge you. Mu Tianyang smiled with relief. Come on. Actually, I also don't like Yan Shenho, so when you teach him a lesson, make up for my part. Mu Qing said. Okay. Mu Tianyang nodded, his body dissipated and turned into a mist, rushing into Mu Qing's head. The next moment, Mu Qing's eyes changed, bright and full of spirit, with a domineering aura, as well as the pressure of a king. Obviously, this body had been replaced by Mu Tianyang. It feels good to have a body. Mu Tianyang stretched his muscles and bones, a cold light flashed in his eyes and said coldly, "No matter who it is, don't even think about shaking my position as the emperor." Swish! In an instant, he disappeared and appeared outside the enchantment. You can continue to hide. As soon as he saw Mu Qing appear, Yan Shenhe was furious and rushed out. He did not know. At this moment, Mu Qing had become Mu Tianyang. Mu Tianyang did not move. However, a cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. If you don't kneel down and apologize to the second deacon today, I'll cripple you. Kneel down now. Yan Shenhe arrived in front of Mu Tianyang and prepared to give him another slap. But suddenly, Mu Tianyang raised his big hand as a wisp of spiritual consciousness entered his arm and grabbed Yan Shenhe's wrist. Yan Shenhe was bewildered. At this moment, he finally realized that Mu Qing's gaze was different. Divine sense? Could it be? How dare you act so presumptuously in front of me? Mu Tianyang coldly smiled. Taking advantage of Yan Shenhe's unprepared state, he kicked him in the stomach. Oh! Yan Shenhe immediately let out a miserable howl like a pig being slaughtered. This was because Mu Tianyang's kick had also been imbued with his divine sense. Mu Qing is my man. What qualifications do you have to beat him? Mu Tianyang said again. Then, he gave Yan Shenhe a tight slap on his face. With a slap, a blood-red palm print appeared. What are you doing? We're just putting on an act. Yan Shenhe was stunned and secretly roared. Even if we're putting on an act, we can't just let Mu Qing get beaten up. Moreover, he's a combat emperor and can't withstand your torment. So now, we can only wrong you. Mu Tianyang sneered and punched Yan Shenhe's chest again. His fist was also imbued with spiritual consciousness. Puff! Yan Shenhe suddenly spurted out blood as his heart was torn apart. He was seriously injured. What's going on? Seeing this scene, the second deacon's face was full of astonishment. Disrespecting your elders, you've gone too far. Yan Shenhe was completely furious. Because he could also see that Mu Tianyang was using his position to avenge his personal grudge. Don't say anything about respecting your elders. In front of this emperor, no matter how high your seniority is, you will always be a subject. Mu Tianyang coldly snorted. Rumble! Bang bang bang! The two of them started fighting in the air above the desert. All of a sudden, the color of the sky changed, the wind blew, rolling up a monstrous wave of sand, drowning in all directions. And then there was Qin Feiyang and his group. Under the lead of the palace master of the heavenly palace, the group was like lightning as they shuttled through the air above the desert. Young master, I always feel that it's not realistic to blindly chase after them like this. We have to think of a more convenient way. Willow Tree scanned the desert in front of him and frowned. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and did not say a word. Suddenly, he slapped his head and shook his head. How could I forget that we have an expert tracker by our side? Chasing after experts? The palace master of the heavenly palace and the ninth elder looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and White-Eyed Wolf immediately appeared. Only under such circumstances will you think of your brother. White-Eyed Wolf stared at Qin Feiyang. What do you mean only under such circumstances? When I obtained the heaven-breaking rod, no one reminded me. Didn't I also want to give it to you? Qin Feiyang said unhappily. That's just a coincidence that I saw you. White-Eyed Wolf pursed his lips. Qin Feiyang said, all right, stop talking nonsense. Quickly smell. Is there the smell of humans here? Do you really think your brother has a dog's nose? White-Eyed Wolf was dissatisfied, but he did not hesitate. He used his nose to sniff and shook his head. There's no smell of them. No. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Look for yourself. There are so many storms around. Even if they pass by here, once they are swept by the storm, their smell will immediately dissipate. White-Eyed Wolf said. Then what should we do? Willow Tree asked. What else can we do? Let's eat. White-Eyed Wolf stood on Qin Feiyong's shoulder and spread his paws. Can you be more serious? Qin Feiyong was extremely angry and mercilessly gave him a knock on the head. White-Eyed Wolf scowled. But when he saw Qin Feiyong, he also glared at him and shrank in an instant. Let's keep moving forward. There are always places that have not been swept by the storm. As long as there is a little smell left, I can track it. White-Eyed Wolf looked full of confidence. The palace master of the Palace of Conferring Heaven looked at him suspiciously, then turned into a stream of light and streaked across the sky like lightning. Soon, they came to the sky above a sand dune. Wait, White-Eyed Wolf suddenly said, his eyes flashing. You found something? The palace master of the Palace of Conferring Heaven slammed on the brakes and stopped in the void. He turned his head and looked at White-Eyed Wolf in surprise. White-Eyed Wolf jumped down from Qin Feiyong's shoulder and flew down. Soon, his eyes locked on one of the sand dune and he said in surprise, there is the smell of people here. Whose? Qin Feiyong quickly asked. It's very faint. I can't tell. White-Eyed Wolf shook his head and carefully identified for a while. He looked up at Qin Feiyong and said, but I can be sure that it is indeed human. Although I can't be sure, I think it should be them. Because no one dares to come here. The palace master of the Palace of Conferring Heaven said. Then let's continue to track. Qin Feiyong urged. The palace master of the Palace of Conferring Heaven rolled up the group again, and rushed in the direction pointed by White-Eyed Wolf. On the way, there were constantly gaps in the smell. The so-called gaps meant that some places had been swept by the storm and the smell had completely disappeared. It was equivalent to a blank area. This undoubtedly made it more difficult to track. However, not long after, White-Eyed Wolf asserted that the people of the Vanga League and the Tianyang Empire went straight into the depths of the desert and did not turn. Because although there were many gaps in the smell, they were always in a straight line. As long as they followed this straight line, they should not lose them. And the result? White-Eyed Wolf did not disappoint them. Not only did he successfully track them down, but the smell also became stronger. After a while, White-Eyed Wolf's eyes lit up and he said, Brother, I finally identified the owner of one of the smells. Who? Qin Feiyong asked. Mu Qing. White-Eyed Wolf said. That's right. If Mu Qing is here, then the others must be here. Qin Feiyong was overjoyed. Who is Mu Qing? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was suspicious. He is a descendant of the Mu Tianyang Empire. He is very amazing and has opened the rare Heavenly Eye. Qin Feiyong said. Heavenly Eye. The palace master of Fengtian Palace's eyes trembled and he said in shock, I used to think that the Heavenly Eye was just a legend, but I didn't expect it to be true. Young master, Mu Tianyang seems to be in the state of divine sense now, right? Willow Tree suddenly asked. Qin Feiyong nodded. That's strange. Mu Qing is such a good body in front of him. Why didn't he seize Mu Qing's body? Willow Tree said. Qin Feiyong said, I think it should be because he thinks too highly of Mu Qing and can't bear to lose her. After a long time, suddenly, the group of people sensed a battle in front of them. What's going on? Is it an illusion? How can there be a battle here? Qin Feiyong was surprised. It's not an illusion. Because there is the aura of Yan Shenhou in the battle. The palace master of Fengtian Palace said. Who is Yan Shenhou? Qin Feiyong asked. One of the 4 divine overlords of the Tianyang Empire. He is also a pseudo-god. After the palace master of Fengtian Palace finished speaking, he frowned and said, However, I can't recognize the aura of the person who is fighting with her. It's very unfamiliar. Unfamiliar? Qin Feiyong was stunned. As they got closer, Qin Feiyong suddenly frowned and a trace of disbelief crept up on his face. What's wrong? The palace master of Fengtian Palace noticed the change in Qin Feiyong's expression and asked in a low voice. Qin Feiyong said, The person who is fighting with Yan Shenhou is actually Mu Qing. Are you sure? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was stunned and asked. I'm sure. Qin Feiyong nodded. The palace master of Fengtian Palace asked, Is Mu Qing very strong? Weaker than me. Qin Feiyong said. That's strange. Weaker than you, she can actually fight with Yan Shenhou? And they are both from the Tianyang Empire. Why would they fight? The palace master of Fengtian Palace was surprised. Qin Feiyang, Willow Tree, Yu Huang, White-Eyed Wolf, and the Ninth Elder were also puzzled. There's something strange about this. We have to be careful because this might be a trap that they have deliberately set up. The palace master of Fengtian Palace said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed, waved his hand and activated the concealment technique. The group instantly disappeared from the void. Looking at Mu Tianyang and Yan Shenhou. At this moment, both of them were covered in wounds and looked extremely miserable. Although Yan Shenhou was seriously injured at the beginning, he was still a real pseudo-god. Mu Tianyang, on the other hand, could only rely on his consciousness to fight. And he didn't have much consciousness. Mu Qing's physical body was only the body of a war king, so it naturally couldn't be compared to the body of a pseudo-god. Therefore, facing Yan Shenhou, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. And Yan Shenhou was furious. However, he also knew about Mu Tianyang's current state, so he didn't dare to kill him. Moreover, at his peak, Mu Tianyang was a true war god. For the sake of the overall situation, he didn't dare to kill Mu Tianyang, because Mu Tianyang had the chance to recover to his peak. However, Chapter 16:12. Stop it. If this goes on, Qin Feiyang and the others will catch up. The second deacon shouted. However, Mu Tianyang and Yan Shenhou turned a deaf ear to her, their eyes spitting flames of anger. I order you to stop immediately. The second deacon flew into a rage out of humiliation. He actually dared to ignore her words? Ordering this emperor? Who do you think you are? If this emperor was still at his peak, killing you would be as easy as slaughtering a dog. Mu Tianyang looked at the second deacon and said proudly. The second deacon's eyes immediately surged with killing intent. Yan Shenhou sneered, looked at Mu Tianyang and said, You also know that I was at my peak, the current you is just a dog in the water. You're courting death. Mu Tianyang was furious. In the distance, Qin Feiyang revealed a look of realization and muttered, So it's Mu Tianyang who is controlling Mu Qing's body. Wait, how could Mu Tianyang be in Mu Qing's body? Could it be that he had already possessed Mu Qing? Yu Huang looked at the second deacon and asked, She is the second deacon of the Vanga League? Yes. The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded and asked suspiciously, Where are the others? Why are there only the three of them? They should all be in the spatial divine object. No matter what the reason is, letting Mu Tianyang and Yan Shenhou fight is a good opportunity for us. Qin Feiyang said. The palace master of Fengtian Palace nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at the palace master of Fengtian Palace and said, Let's split up, you take people to kill the second deacon, we'll kill Yan Shenhou and Mu Tianyang, we must kill them in one blow. Yes. The palace master of Fengtian Palace waved his hand and brought the ninth elder into the spatial divine object. Qin Feiyang also brought Willow Tree, Yu Huang, and White-Eyed Wolf into the castle. Then, he controlled the castle and silently flew towards Mu Tianyang. But at the same time, Mu Tianyang's eyes flickered with an indescribable light. This was the heavenly eye. After controlling Mu's body, he naturally controlled Mu Qing's eye of heaven. In the process of fighting with Yan Shenhou, he had always been using heaven's eye. This was so that he could keep track of his whereabouts at any time. So, in fact, he already knew that Qin Feiyang had arrived. He transmitted his voice to Yan Shenhou. Qin Feiyang is not far from us. He is rushing towards us. Prepare to retreat at any time. All right. Yan Shenhou secretly replied. The second deacon was completely unaware of the approaching danger. Looking at Mu Tianyang and the other two, he shouted, I'll say it one last time, stop immediately. The corners of their mouths curled up at the same time. It seems that you really won't cry until you enter the coffin. The second deacon suddenly soared into the air and rushed towards the two of them. Seeing this, the two of them finally stopped and turned to look at the second deacon at the same time. Mu Tianyang laughed contemptuously and said, The one who won't cry until you enter the coffin is you. Do you want to rebel? The second deacon was startled and raised his eyebrows. Rebel? Mu Tianyang and the other two looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, The palace master of Fengtian Palace suddenly appeared behind the second deacon without any warning. Before the second deacon could react, he felt a pain in his lower abdomen. She instinctively looked down and found that there was half a sword tip on her lower abdomen. The sword was stained with blood. Someone's here? Her first reaction was to look back. Immediately, a familiar face entered his eyes and immediately turned pale with fright. He saw the palace master of Fengtian Palace, holding a battle sword with divine light in his hand, and his eyes were filled with shocking killing intent. Damn it, how did they catch up so quickly? Inside the space divine object, the Vanga League people were all shocked and angry. On the other side, Willow Tree and Yu Huang also appeared behind Mu Tianyang and Yen Shinho at the same time. Chang Shui and Snake Scale exuded a sharp aura that could destroy the world, and rushed towards the back of the two. Chang Shui. When the second deacon saw Willow Tree and Chang Shui, his eyes suddenly trembled, full of fear. Mu Tianyang smiled disdainfully, grabbed Yen Shinho, and instantly disappeared without a trace. Willow Tree and Yu Huang were stunned. Seeing this situation, the palace master of Fengtian Palace was also stunned. How did they react so quickly? Did they know in advance that Yu Huang and Willow Tree were hiding in the dark and were ready to attack them? Whoosh! Just when the palace master of Fengtian Palace was stunned, two figures suddenly appeared and rushed towards the palace master of Fengtian Palace. One of them was the deputy chief of the Vanga League. Another person had also appeared. He was wearing a fitting white robe. His identity was not simple either. He was the chief of the Vanga League. At this moment, their eyes were filled with murderous intent. Obviously, they wanted to take advantage of the distraction of the palace master of Fengtian Palace and rush out from the space divine object, kill the palace master of Fengtian Palace, and save the second deacon. But how could the palace master of Fengtian Palace be simple? Although Mu Tianyang and Yen Shinho's reaction was somewhat unexpected, he also knew that the Vanga League people were hiding in the dark, so he did not let down his guard. As soon as the two appeared, he smiled coldly and immediately pulled out the battle sword from the second deacon's lower abdomen. The power of the false god surged in, and the battle sword quickly recovered. He slashed with the sword. The edge of the sword was overwhelming. Even the famous chief and deputy chief could not help but change their expressions and avoid the sword. At the same time, Willow Tree and Yu Huang also came back to their senses and immediately released their divine senses in all directions. Immediately, they captured Mu Tianyang's space divine object and it was escaping into the distance. Stop right there. Willow Tree and Yu Huang were furious and were about to chase after it. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang appeared out of thin air and shouted, "Willow Tree, don't chase, deal with the Vanga League first." Yes. Willow Tree nodded, grabbed Chang Shui, and turned to kill the chief and deputy chief. When the chief and deputy chief of the Vanga League saw Chang Shui, their pupils suddenly shrank, and they disappeared without any hesitation. They're hiding just like that? Willow Tree was stunned. Yu Huang floated next to Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, "Why didn't they chase after Mu Tianyang?" Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and said, "If I'm not wrong, this is a trap set by Mu Tianyang and Yen Shinho." A trap? Yu Huang was surprised. That's right. Qin Feiyang nodded and said to himself, "Earlier, when they looked at each other and smiled, I felt that it was a little strange. Now I understand that they were deliberately stalling for time in order for us to catch up to them." Yu Huang was stunned and said, "What's in it for them if we catch up with them? Are they crazy?" "Of course. I think Mu Tianyang's goal is to let us and the Vanga League suffer losses, and then the Tianyang Empire will reap the benefits." Qin Feiyang said secretly. Damn, did Mu Tianyang eat a leopard's guts? He actually dared to scheme against the Vanga League. Yu Huang was speechless. Are you kidding? As an imperial emperor and a god of war, how can he not have guts? Qin Feiyang laughed secretly. However, he guessed wrong. The real mastermind of this plan was Mu Qing. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he turned around and landed next to the palace master of Fengtian Palace and looked at the second deacon who was bleeding from his abdomen. "Why are you helping Fengtian Palace?" Chapter 16:13. As the saying goes, the evils we bring on ourselves are the hardest to bear. We should be the ones working together, but you wanted to play with fire. You made Gao Yuan explode himself, plotted against me, and pushed me to the side of the palace of Fengtian. Qin Feiyang sneered. Willow Tree sneered. Cut the crap. Just kill him. The palace master of the palace of Fengtian was filled with murderous intent. He immediately waved his sword and slashed at the head of the second deacon. Don't kill him, Qin Feiyang hurriedly said. The palace master of the palace of Fengtian was slightly stunned. He frowned and said, Why not? You're confused. Your wife and 3 sons are now in their hands. If you want to save them, you need a bargaining chip. This person is the best bargaining chip. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. The palace master of the palace of Fengtian was suddenly enlightened. He immediately released his divine power and imprisoned the second deacon. Then he shouted, Ning Mingyi Zhao Tailai, get out of here right now. Ning Mingyi? Zhao Tailai. Yu Huang was stunned. He looked at Willow Tree suspiciously and asked, Human pet, who are these 2? Ning Mingyi is the leader of the Vanga League. Zhao Tailai is the deputy leader of the Vanga League. They are hiding in the divine item. If they suddenly attack young master, the consequences will be unimaginable. We can't be careless. Willow Tree whispered. He stood beside Qin Feiyang and was fully alert. Moreover, the power of the fake god kept flowing into Xueqi. His divine power spread in all directions. What are you afraid of? Xueqi is in your hands. Do they dare to come out? If one comes out, I'll kill one. If 2 come out, I'll kill both. Yu Huang laughed sinisterly. We can't be careless. Who knows what crazy things they will do? Willow Tree said in a deep voice. In the divine item, Ning Mingyi and Zhao Tailai's faces were as gloomy as water. The semi-divinities behind him were also infuriated. The Vanga League had dominated the Black Tortoise world for so many years, but this was the first time they had been so aggrieved. You don't want to come out? The palace lord of Fengtian Palace's eyes shone with an ominous light. As his sword fell, the second deacon let out a blood-curdling scream as one of his arms was severed. This is divine meat. We can't waste it. Yu Huang licked its lips, extended its scarlet tongue, and directly rolled the arm into its mouth. This bastard is going too far. Seeing this, the group of people behind the 2 alliance masters were enraged. You still don't want to come out? It seems like the second deacon is worthless in your eyes. Since that's the case, I won't be polite. Qin Feiyang chuckled and formed a seal with both hands. An enslavement seal quickly condensed. The palace master of Fengtian Palace was stunned. He smiled and said, Congratulations, little brother, you have gained another great general by your side. Qin Feiyang smiled and waved his hand. The enslavement seal went straight to the top of the second deacon's head. Stop. At this moment, a cold shout was heard. Then, Ning Mingyi and Zhao Tailai appeared in front of them. Qin Feiyang smirked and the enslavement seal stopped above the second deacon's head. He cupped his hands and smiled. Greetings, seniors. I'm new here. I hope you can take care of me. Hearing this, Ning Mingyi and Zhao Tailai's eyes flashed with a hint of hostility. Take care. How could they not understand such sarcastic words? Little brother, I'm deeply sorry about Gao Yuan's self-destruction. However, this was the Grand Deacon's idea. We only knew about it after the incident. So, little brother, please don't make things difficult for the Vanga League. I'm also willing to compensate you for your loss. Ning Mingyi glanced at the second deacon, then looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled without blushing. Actually, saying these words was already a great humiliation to him as the leader of the Vanga League. With his identity and status, when had he ever been so humble? Moreover, the person he was talking to was Qin Feiyang, a mere 6-star combat emperor. You only knew about it after the incident? Compensate me for my loss. Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly and said, Are you really going to compensate me? I'm just afraid that you can't afford it. What does the Vanga League not have? Zhao Tailai snorted coldly. So confident? All right. Qin Feiyang looked at Ning Mingyi and said, Give me all your artifacts and the herbs of the Vanga League. Then we'll call it even. You? Ning Mingyi instantly glared at him. Zhao Tailai said impolitely, Young man, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't go too far. Weren't you very magnanimous and forthright just now? Why are you so hostile now? Qin Feiyong said playfully. Both of them looked extremely upset. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace said in a deep voice, "Hurry up and hand over my wife and child." "All right. But I have a condition too," Ning Mingi said. "Say it," the palace master said. "In exchange for the second deacon and the grand deacon. 4 for 2. You won't lose out," Ning Mingi said. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace raised his eyebrows and turned to look at Qin Feiyong. Since the grand deacon was in Qin Feiyong's hands, he couldn't make the decision. "Since it's a cooperation, I'll naturally help you," Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Hearing this, Ning Mingi and Zhao Tai felt extremely regretful. They didn't expect this guy to be so loyal. They shouldn't have let Gao Yuan self-destruct. If Gao Yuan didn't self-destruct, the Vanga League wouldn't be the ones in trouble. It would be the Fengtian Palace. "Thank you," the palace master of the Fengtian Palace said gratefully. He looked at Ning Mingi expressionlessly and said, "Deal." Ning Mingi sighed deeply and waved his hand. 4 figures suddenly appeared. One of them was an old woman. She looked like she was in her 30s and had maintained herself very well. There were no crow's feet at the corner of her eyes. Her skin was soft and supple. She was wearing a white floor-length dress. Her soft hair was tied up high and there was an exquisite jade hairpin at the end of her hair. Her charm was still there. The other 3 were all very young men. One of them was Li Chong. "Father, save us." At this moment, his face was full of horror and he looked helplessly at the palace master of the Fengtian Palace. The other 2 looked very similar to Li Chong. They were also looking at the palace master for help. And as Zhuge Mingyang said, the 3 of them were in a sorry state. Their noses were bruised and their eyes were swollen. They were covered in bruises. They were covered in blood. Their sea of qi was also destroyed. Obviously, they were tortured by the Vanga League. As for the woman, other than her cultivation being destroyed, there were no injuries on her body. Looking at the miserable state of Li Chong and the other 2, the palace master of the Fengtian Palace was furious. He shouted, "Let them go. Let them go together," Ning Mingi said. The palace master of the Fengtian Palace quickly looked at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and the senior deacon immediately appeared beside him. Looking at the senior deacon who was also covered in wounds, Ning Mingi and the other 2 were also furious. Ning Mingi asked, "Did he use the slave seal to control you?" The senior deacon shook his head. Ning Mingi nodded and looked at the palace master of the Fengtian Palace. He said, "Give me the money and I will give you the goods. Don't play any tricks." After that, the power of the false god emerged and bound the woman and Li Chong to the palace master of the Fengtian Palace. "It's you who don't play any tricks." The palace master of the Fengtian Palace snorted. He also used the power of the false god to bind the senior deacon and the other 2 and walked toward the leader of the Vanga League. Zhao Tai looked at the 2 of them and there was a flash of shocking light in the depths of his eyes. Qin Feiyong glanced at the 2 of them and then at Zhao Tai. He sent a message to Willow Tree and Yu Huang, "Keep an eye on them. Once the 2 sides change, attack immediately." "Okay," Willow Tree replied secretly. In fact, even without Qin Feiyong's reminder, he was already secretly preparing. It was not hard to imagine that the Vanga League would not fight them head-on. Because in the Vanga League, there was no divine artifact that could compete with Chang Shui. Therefore, once the senior deacon and the second deacon got their hands on them, Ning Mingi and Zhao Tai would immediately enter the divine artifact and find a chance to escape. Of course. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.